I spent $200,000. Kenny, who didn't even come to my mom's funeral, had suddenly flown overseas. $200,000. What did you do with all that money? Remember our nice piano at home? I sold the dude. Being from a rich family has its perks. It was a good piano. I never thought it would sell for $200,000. Kenny thought the piano at home was his, but he was wrong. My condolences. I get all the inheritance from the family estate. But that piano was actually bought by our grandpa for my brother, so it's still his. My brother loves that piano and teaches piano now. He left it at our house because it's too big for his place. If my brother finds out we sold it without asking him, he'll be really mad. Just giving him money won't fix it. When I told Kenny this, he hung up right away. Hi, I'm Rachel Schneider, a 45-year-old office worker. My family has a long history tracing back to colonial times and is quite prominent in our community. Thanks to my late father's successful business, we now possess assets worth $9 million. Originally, my older brother was set to inherit the family estate, but he chose love over inheritance, opting to forego his rights to marry his girlfriend, who needed an heir for her family's wealth. This decision left me with the task of finding a spouse to carry on our family name. Despite my desire for independence and reluctance to rely on family wealth, I focused solely on my career, and before I knew it, I was in my mid-40s and still single. Realizing the urgency of continuing our family line, I decided to take action and attended a singles mixer. It was there that I met Kenny, my current husband. Surprisingly, he's 10 years younger than me, but at the event, he showed no interest in the younger women and approached me directly. I'm not sure if you're okay with someone my age, I asked him multiple times. But Kenny gazed into my eyes and replied, I'm a bit shy and not very assertive. I've always been attracted to older, more grounded women. Kenny's demeanor matched his words, gentle and reserved. I sensed he could bring a sense of calm to my family, which tends to be assertive. As our relationship blossomed, there was something important I needed to share with him. My mother had been ill and bedridden for the past year, and my sister-in-law, Catherine, and I were taking turns caring for her. Considering our age and the prospect of marriage, I struggled with how to reveal this to Kenny. Eventually, on our third date, I mustered the courage to tell him. To my relief, he not only accepted but also proposed, expressing his willingness to assist with caregiving. His kindness deeply moved me. At least, that's how I initially felt. Kenny works as a daycare teacher, but just 4 months into our marriage, he expressed a sudden desire to quit his job. When I inquired about the reason, he wore a remorseful expression and said, "Sorry, Rachel. The parents at the daycare are too demanding and complain a lot. I can't handle it anymore." It was evident that Kenny was struggling, appearing so timid. Normally, I would have encouraged him to persevere, but with him assisting in my mother's care and my pregnancy progressing, I remained silent. However, I soon began to regret my leniency. One day, as I exited the shower and approached the bedroom, I overheard Kenny whispering on the phone. What I heard left me shocked and unsettled. I managed to tie the knot without her suspecting a thing. I'm jobless. She bought my story about quitting work hook, line, and sinker. Little does she know, I ditched that job 2 years back. His conversation seemed directed at a friend on the other end of the line. A faint male voice responded, "You're quite the operator. Rachel's family is loaded, so I thought I hit the jackpot when I met her at that singles event. But let's face it, given her age, I was probably her only option. I felt duped. Was the sweet Kenny I fell for all an act?" I wanted to confront him right then and there, but the thought of the baby stopped me cold. With Kenny's true colors revealed, I began to doubt our future. Today, Catherine will be looking after my mom until 5:00 p.m. Then it's my turn. I debated whether to confide in someone about Kenny. That's when my brother's wife, Catherine, approached me. "Rachel, you seem troubled. If there's anything on your mind, feel free to share," Catherine said, her kindness evident, having cared for her own mother for years and now mine. "She's really good with Mom too. So I confided in her about Kenny, and she listened attentively. It's good you opened up. Keeping it to yourself could harm your unborn child, she reassured me. Yeah, I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Talking won't solve everything, but it does lighten the load. Still, this situation is quite something. Catherine looked genuinely concerned, almost as if it were her own problem. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and Kenny walked in without waiting for an answer. Both of us were surprised, but Kenny acted as if nothing was wrong and smiled. Rachel, I'll be helping with your mom's care from now on. You're not in the safe period yet, so I don't want you to strain yourself, Kenny said, playing the gentleman in front of me. Really? Okay, let me show you how to care for her. No, I'll learn from Catherine. You just rest at home. Well, my brother's coming home early today, so we won't need her help. Upon hearing that, Catherine looked at me, shaking her head, as if to say, it's okay. She might confront Kenny and get the full story once I'm gone. With that in mind, I decided to leave it to her and head home. But I couldn't shake my worry, so I pretended to leave but hid nearby. Catherine tried to start a conversation with Kenny, but he beat her to it. I've been meaning to ask, why are you taking care of your mother-in-law in this house? He asked, using the same tone as on the phone. Well, my husband's busy, and Rachel has her job. But more importantly, why you ask? Then Kenny interrupted. What? And began hurling insults at Catherine. You live in such a wealthy home. You'd have enough money to put your mother-in-law in a care facility, wouldn't you? Or is it something else? Did your husband give up his claim to this family's wealth? So you're trying to curry favor by taking care of her? That must be it. You'd be pretty upset if you married into money and didn't get a piece of the inheritance, wouldn't you? It was cruel. I was furious too, ready to leave the room. But just as I was about to, Catherine, noticing me, signaled with her eyes to stay put. Reluctantly, I remained silent and watched the scene unfold. You've hit a nerve, haven't you? If that's the case, leave right now. This family's wealth belongs to my wife and me, so I'll handle my mother-in-law's care alone from now on. With Kenny's stern declaration, Catherine felt it was pointless to argue further and left the scene. Sensing the tension, I discreetly stepped outside, concerned about Catherine's feelings and wondering how to apologize to her. Kenny took over Mom's care entirely, refusing any assistance from me. He only provided basic instructions on caregiving. But his neglectful approach led to tragic consequences, and our mother passed away. The funeral took place at the church where generations of our family had been laid to rest. However, Kenny was nowhere to be found from the moment Mom passed away. Despite my attempts to locate him, I was too overwhelmed with funeral arrangements to pursue the matter. Relatives and neighbors were puzzled by his absence. Catherine, grief-stricken at the altar, apologized for trusting Kenny with Mom's care. Approaching her, I tried to offer some comfort. Catherine, please don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. Rachel, it's not your fault either. But where is that man? I wanted to confront him today, and he disappears just as Mom passes away. Exactly. And didn't Kenny often leave the house while he was supposed to be caring for Mom? Where was he going? Yes, neighbors mentioned he was frequently out, almost as if he wasn't caregiving at all, just loafing around. They also mentioned a big truck that came by once. What was that about? I wanted to ask, but with the funeral, I didn't bring it up. Days passed, and Kenny still hadn't returned. Then, I received a call from him. Hey Rachel, I'm in a fancy hotel in Europe, like the ones you see on TV travel shows, Kenny said nonchalantly. Kenny, you missed Mom's funeral, and now this. I spent $200,000. $200,000? Where did you get that kind of money? Remember the grand piano at our family home? I sold it. Who knew it was worth $200,000? Kenny confessed to selling the family's cherished grand piano and squandering the money on luxury travel in Europe. I never imagined Kenny would pull something like this while supposed to be caring for Mom. Our family home had tight security, but with family, it's different. That truck must have been there to move the piano. Why would you do something so selfish? The whole family was worried about you missing the funeral. Well, once you have a kid, you won't have much free time. Since you have a job, I guess I'll have to be the stay-at-home dad. Kenny's words left me stunned. Despite my anger, his willingness to take on childcare was a silver lining. But it seemed he was aiming to live off me. Additionally, Kenny seemed to think the piano belonged to me. Confronting Kenny, who had unknowingly sold a piano and spent the money, I started with, "My condolences." "Huh? What do you mean?" Kenny seemed bewildered, so I explained about the piano. "That piano belonged to my grandfather, bought for my brother. So it still belongs to him." "Oh, really? I'll just apologize to your brother then," Kenny replied, lacking any remorse for selling someone else's property. Kenny only met my brother at our wedding, so it's understandable he didn't know. My brother is a piano teacher and has loved the piano since childhood. He begged our grandfather for that specific piano. Although there's no room for it in his house now, it's still his. He even dreams of starting his own school with it. The piano means everything to him. I can only imagine what punishment he'll have for you when he hears it was sold without permission. By the way, my brother despises dishonesty. As I explained, Kenny remained silent. Understand? Mere compensation won't suffice when he finds out you sold his beloved piano. He's not one to compromise. I wonder what punishment awaits you. With that warning, the call abruptly ended. He's probably regretting it now. I called my brother and told him everything. Needless to say, he was furious. The next day, Kenny rushed home, finding everyone gathered in the living room. "What's going on? Why is everyone here?" Kenny asked nervously. "I heard everything from Rachel," my brother said sternly. "What possessed you to sell someone else's property, especially something so valuable, without consulting the family?" Kenny tried to justify himself, visibly shaken. I was just trying to pitch in with the household chores out of boredom. When I saw the old, large grand piano, I figured no one was using it anymore. So you decided to sell it. Yeah, it seemed like a waste to just leave it there. My brother, wearing a stern expression, pressed further. Really? That piano was special, imported by our grandfather from a top European manufacturer. Where's the money from the sale? As anticipated, my brother was playing his part well. Everyone probably knew Kenny had spent all the money on an overseas trip, but my brother was aiming for a confession in front of everyone. Kenny seemed lost in thought, struggling to come up with an excuse. The sales money. Yeah, it hasn't come in yet. Kenny stammered, clearly flustered, but my brother wasn't buying it. You're lying? How deceitful can you get? And what about those souvenirs from Europe in that huge suitcase? Kenny recoiled as if struck by lightning, closing his eyes in shame. I'm sorry, I spent all the money. Kenny's admission left the relatives murmuring in shock. Everyone knew the value of that grand piano. They couldn't fathom how Kenny could blow $200,000 on just one trip overseas. My brother, looking down at Kenny, lifted his chin with his hand, locking eyes with him as he said, "As Rachel probably told you, that piano was mine. Now that it's gone, you'll repay every penny. If you can't, I'll sue you for theft. Are we clear?" My brother's intensity was palpable, almost resembling a mob boss. While this would typically be a family matter, my brother was likely using intimidation tactics, knowing Kenny was clueless about the law. Predictably, Kenny lost his voice and began sweating profusely. Then, with a terrified glance at me, he pleaded, "Rachel, please help me." His voice was desperate, but I had no intention of intervening. This mess was entirely of his own making. When I rejected his plea, Kenny resorted to a ludicrous argument, saying, "Don't be so cold. I looked after your mom while you were pregnant. I saw the trip as a reward for myself after caregiving. Let's just say we both agreed to sell the piano this way. Since we're siblings, it can't be considered theft, right?" I was so dumbfounded that my mouth hung open, unable to form a response. It was Catherine who stepped in to defend me. "That's enough. Didn't you tell Rachel not to assist with caregiving? You even accused me of being after the inheritance and tried to push me away. Kenny, did you say such awful things to my wife too? Yes, I didn't want to worry you, so I kept quiet. But this man must have been scheming to sell the piano without letting Rachel and me near the family home. Catherine's words resonated with me, remembering how Kenny prevented me from getting close to the family home when he said he'd handle our parents alone. I reached the same conclusion. My brother's anger flared up once more. Listen closely. My wife cared for Mom because she wanted her to stay out of the facility. She agreed out of kindness, not for money. First, apologize to my wife right now. With my brother grabbing Kenny by the collar, tears welled up in Kenny's eyes as he knelt before Catherine. I'm so sorry, Catherine. Kenny's apology for his disrespectful behavior towards Catherine didn't soften the cold gazes of the relatives. Then, one of them shouted at Kenny, "You need to repay the money from the piano sale promptly. We can't tolerate a criminal in the Schneider family. It'll stain our name." Misinterpreting the situation once more, Kenny made another peculiar remark. Exactly. We can't have a criminal in the family, right, bro? So let's keep calm. We'll work together as a couple to repay the debt gradually. Even my uncle was left speechless by Kenny's illogical response. Feeling that further discussion would be futile, I excused myself to retrieve something from my room. Ever since the phone incident, I had a divorce lawyer's business card ready. Kenny, call this number. I want our marriage to end. Let's handle things through legal channels. Kenny's face drained of color when he saw the business card I handed him. Why? We're expecting a baby. Why are you doing this? At that moment, I disclosed what Kenny had said to everyone on the phone. You heard that. It was just a joke. Do you think that's a valid excuse? I've known all along that you were after my inheritance. Everyone present glared at Kenny, realizing there was no way to justify his actions. Kenny responded with defiance, unwilling to admit his wrongdoing. Rachel, please, I need your help, Kenny pleaded in desperation. He explained that the buyer of the grand piano he sold wanted to return it and get a refund. When Kenny had sold the piano, he claimed it was in perfect condition. However, upon inspection, the buyer discovered a large engraving on the back indicating my brother's ownership. It seemed Kenny hadn't checked thoroughly. Instead of selling it through a reputable dealer, he likely chose a shady one enticed by offers like completely free, and now he faced the consequences. Kenny had to refund $200,000 to the buyer, a significant sum considering his debt to my brother. Despite Kenny's attempt to file for bankruptcy, my brother and I took legal action to prevent it. Now, burdened with more debt, Kenny worked tirelessly in manual labor. Eventually, the heirloom grand piano was safely returned. Relieved, my brother secured it with a strong lock and installed a security camera in the room, exercising caution. No one will touch that piano until I begin my piano lessons, my brother declared, unchanged from his childhood self, which brought a smile to my face. With his desire to start a piano school at our family home, I decided to discuss sharing our mother's inheritance. Feeling guilty for inheriting everything alone after Catherine's devoted care for our mother, I proposed the idea to my brother, who agreed. It ensured a positive relationship with his family in the future. And so, I welcomed a long-awaited baby girl. While some relatives hoped for an heir, I believe daughters tend to cherish their mothers longer in today's age. Besides, my mother, an only daughter herself, accepted a son-in-law, so if necessary, my daughter could do the same. Embracing single motherhood, I found unwavering support from Catherine, who had finished raising her own children. Grateful for her assistance during my mother's care, I felt deeply indebted to her. My brother eagerly volunteered to be a father figure for my daughter, his excitement palpable. Additionally, my brother and Catherine's 2 adult daughters, both kindergarten teachers, shared his passion for the piano, bonding with my daughter. Surrounded by such warmth and support, I felt immensely fortunate, and with gratitude, I resolved to face life's challenges head-on with my daughter by my side.
Are you in there? Open up. Please give me a break. I'm finally enjoying my time in our new home. Open the door. I reluctantly opened the front door to avoid disturbing the neighbors. Running away when you can't even have children? I don't recognize you as my son's wife. Standing there were my husband Timothy, his mistress, and my mother-in-law Joanna. What? For the sake of my new daughter-in-law and the grandchild on the way, we're taking this house as compensation. Get out. Yes, hurry up and leave. That's right, you barren old woman, we're done with you. They were really saying whatever they wanted. They didn't even realize how mistaken they were. My name is Sandra. I'm 43 years old and work in a corporate job. My husband, Timothy, is a year younger than me. We don't have any children. We thought it would happen naturally, but it never did. After many discussions, we decided to live our lives together as a couple without children. I have no regrets. We've been living in the same apartment since we got married. It's small and old, but it's comfortable enough. Saving money for a home and living modestly has its own joys. I was recently assigned to the planning department at my company, a position I've wanted for a long time. After working hard in the demanding sales department, it finally paid off. I've been promoted steadily and have become a reliable figure within the company. For me, without children, my work is my life. But it seems Timothy feels differently. You quit your job? Again? Yeah. What? Without even discussing it with me? I was too shocked to speak. My boss was nagging me when I refused to transfer. So you quit because of that? It ended up that way, but I'm the victim here. It's unfair dismissal. I sighed. Then you should sue and claim compensation. No, I don't want to make a big deal out of it. I knew it. It wasn't unfair dismissal. This was Timothy's bad habit. He couldn't stick with a job for long. He wasn't irresponsible, but he would suddenly quit when he got fed up. Switching jobs every 2 or 3 years had become the norm, and each time, it disrupted our finances and daily routines. As a partner, I couldn't tell him to endure a job he hated. But we're in our 40s now. Repeated job changes only brought more disadvantages. At times like this, I was glad we didn't have children. I could support us. And if something happened to me, he would support me. I understood that, but finding a new job wasn't going well, and time just kept passing. The timing was bad, but age and experience were also factors. He was frustrated. He stayed home all day without doing any housework, just sighing. If he was bored, he could at least clean up his own mess. I have more right to be annoyed than you. I thought about saying something. When the house is small, there's nowhere to escape to, which makes it tough. Calm down. Arguing wouldn't solve anything. I held back my urge to blame him and watched over him. He finally found a job as a contract worker at a factory. It wasn't what he wanted, but it was better than being unemployed. We would slowly get back on track. Together, we could manage. One day, Joanna called. Hello. Sandra? Joanna, what's going on? I heard you've been treating Timothy coldly, haven't you? Huh? I let out a weird noise in surprise. I had no idea what she was talking about. Isn't it terrible to treat my son like that when he's hurt from being unfairly fired? Wait a minute, Joanna. I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean? I should be asking you. You've been harsh, telling him to hurry up and get a job or clean up, right? Why does it come to this? Sure, I said things like, I hope you find a job soon. Or, please put away the things you've left out. I made these comments carefully, trying to be considerate, even if they were a bit sarcastic. But I never used a commanding tone. This is another bad habit of him. Whenever something happens, he immediately tells his mother. And he exaggerates the story. Joanna is also at fault for taking him seriously, but when will he ever grow up and become independent? It's too much. He doesn't blame you, right? Well, that's because there's no reason to. What are you talking about? Sandra deserves to be blamed. It's your fault they don't have children. There are things more important than work, you know? You can't take it back once it's gone. Why is it my fault that we don't have children? He seems to be making up a very convenient story. We decided on this together, but now I feel betrayed. He wants to maintain his image, but to side with his mom and make me the villain is just childish. As a couple who will spend many more years together, we can't lose trust in each other. With that in mind, I decided to talk to Timothy that night. Please don't exaggerate stories to Joanna. If you have complaints, tell me directly. Let's do that for our future. Okay? Timothy, clearly annoyed, started fiddling with his smartphone in the middle of our conversation. Hey, listen to me. You're annoying. I'm getting a work message. With that, he got up and left. He didn't come back to continue the conversation and went straight to the bedroom. Is he in a bad mood, or is it the fatigue from working at the factory? I have no choice. We'll talk another time. But the next day, Timothy said he was tired and refused to talk. The day after that, he came home late from a company party. He spent the whole day off sleeping because of a hangover. After that, he stayed out late due to overtime and socializing. He was clearly avoiding me. He's trying to make it go away, but that won't solve anything. I hate being baselessly accused by Joanna. Rubbing my sleepy eyes, I waited for Timothy to come home. This is a problem that can't be postponed just because it's troublesome. Around midnight, Timothy came home humming happily. Welcome back. You scared me. What's wrong? You startled me. Were you awake? I was waiting for you, Timothy. Huh? Timothy looked annoyed. Why are you avoiding me? You're annoying. Something's wrong with you. You're persistent. If you have something to say, leave me a note. A note? Did we agree to avoid discussing things? Ugh. Remembering something from so long ago, you're really persistent. I was shocked. Had he forgotten our wedding vows? When I said I wanted us to be a couple who understood each other. He nodded and said, I think so too. I liked your seriousness, but now it's too rigid and heavy. If you don't want to lose me, change your attitude. There's another woman. What do you mean? Exactly what it sounds like. Are you cheating? I had a feeling based on his recent behavior. Is this a joke? What did I do? I'm telling you, you're too persistent. Do you want a divorce? Please, don't say that. Timothy clicked his tongue in annoyance. He pulled a piece of paper from his bag and shoved it at me roughly. It was a completed divorce application. Why do you have this? I was asked to write it. By whom? You know who. No, I don't. There's a woman who wants it submitted. I was at a loss for words. Did he fill out the divorce papers at his mistress's request? Don't get too full of yourself. You need me. Know your place. My hands trembled as I clutched the divorce papers. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. It's late. I'm going to bed. You should go cool off somewhere. Timothy disappeared into the bedroom. I stared at Timothy's name on the divorce papers. What was he feeling when he wrote this? Was he with his mistress when he was late tonight? I, who had been supporting his new job, was such a foolish wife. My head spun with confusion. I couldn't think straight. I needed to cool down, just as he said. I grabbed what valuables and essentials I could and silently left the house. A month later. I haven't been back home since. I've tried contacting Timothy several times, but there has been no response. This room is quiet and comfortable. It calms my mind. The sunlight streaming through the window brightens the still empty living room. The ventilation is good. As the cool air touched my cheeks, I took a deep breath, letting the scent of wood fill me. Then, "Sandra, are you in there? Open up." The grating voice made me frown. That familiar, loud voice belonged to Joanna. Just great, exactly what I didn't need. I was finally starting to feel at peace. "Sandra!" Reluctantly, I opened the front door to avoid causing a scene with the neighbors. I made sure to look thoroughly annoyed. "Ah, there you are. Long time no see," Joanna said cheerfully. She tried to force her way inside, but I pushed her back. "Wait a minute. Why? What's wrong?" Can she see my face? I'm clearly trying to refuse her. "Wow, not bad at all." To my surprise, Timothy was with her. And who was that young valley girl standing beside him? Smells like new construction. Nice. Very nice. The three of them tried to enter the house as if it were the most natural thing. Their audacity was beyond belief. "Wait! How did you find me?" "Find you?" "First, answer this. Why have you been treating Timothy so horribly?" "What? Leaving everything and running away makes you a terrible wife. Just because you don't like Veronica." "Veronica. Oh, this valley girl. I see, she has Joanna's approval. Wait, did I run away from home?" I felt like Timothy had told me to go somewhere, like he was kicking me out. He clung to the valley girl, giving me a provocative look. It's a spec house, but the number of rooms is just right, and the interior design is decent. I can forgive you for buying a new house on your own. "What? But we can't live together. Your infertility is a disgrace." "What are you talking about?" "Be grateful we stayed with you until now." Confused, I tilted my head, not understanding a word. "Timothy, I'm tired. I need to sit." "Yes, Veronica, I'm sorry." "Sandra. Let Veronica sit inside." "No." "What? Don't be ridiculous. She is pregnant with Timothy's child." "What? Pregnant?" This was news to me. Strangely, I didn't feel much of anything. Why was that? A series of shocking events left me wondering if I was in a nightmare or if I had become numb to everything. Shouldn't pregnant women be respected? Sandra, who is infertile, wouldn't understand. Oh, is that so? Don't you get it yet? I accept Veronica as my son's wife, not Sandra. I'll take this house as compensation, so you need to leave. Yeah, hurry up and get out. Right, good luck, old infertile lady. How could they say such things? They didn't even realize their own misunderstanding. I can't give this house as compensation. Even if you tell me to leave, this house is in my name. What? Besides, we're already divorced. What? Timothy and Joanna were shocked. Was it really that surprising? You handed me the completed divorce papers, didn't you? Sandra, what do you mean? Weren't you planning to start a new life with us? I never had any such intention. Joanna panicked while Timothy seethed with anger. What are you talking about? This house was purchased with my money. What? Unbelievable. They probably hadn't read any of the texts I sent. You really know nothing, do you? The night Timothy handed me the divorce papers, all the patience I had as a wife vanished, and I was filled with a sense of liberation. My heart swelled with joy, and I couldn't think straight. Was I about to start a new life of freedom? When I realized that, I felt so excited that I got dizzy. I signed the wife's section of the divorce papers with joy and submitted them to the court first thing the next morning. I made sure to split the savings evenly and transferred half to Timothy's account. Considering my earnings so far, most of the savings were mine, but I wanted to avoid any disputes. I sent a text saying, "From now on, let's communicate through lawyers." I used half of the savings I split with Timothy and the bonus I received afterwards as a down payment to purchase a new house. The rest was covered by a loan. Timothy said, "A loan? A housewife can't get a loan." I was dumbfounded by Timothy's condescending remark. If you kept changing jobs, you wouldn't be able to get a loan. What? Since you don't manage the household finances, you wouldn't know, but my salary is double yours. Maybe his pride was hurt, because Timothy's face turned red with anger. Even Veronica seemed surprised. "Timothy, this is different from what you told me, right? You said we'd live in a new luxury house." Calm down, Veronica. Timothy, or rather my ex-husband, was visibly shaken. I've been supporting the household all this time. The idea of living with his new wife and Joanna was absurd. "Sandra!" Joanna looked like she was about to explode with rage. "This is unforgivable! It's fraud!" Joanna, who wrote the divorce papers first? And who made him write it? It was her, the future wife of your son, who would support you. And now you have a grandchild too. Congratulations. "No, we'll take the house too." Joanna was fuming. How arrogant. "That's not possible. Such a big house, it's a waste for Sandra to live here alone. I plan to live with my parents eventually." "What? What is my son's wife saying?" No, I'm no longer your son's wife. I'm not related to you, Joanna. And who knows, there might be another great encounter waiting for me. Of course, I wouldn't say that out loud. "What's going on?" "I was planning to settle down in this house." Joanna looked dejected. "What happened to the apartment you were living in, Joanna?" "I sold that old place." "You sold it?" "Yes, I saw you moving appliances into this new house and immediately called Timothy. He invited me to live with him." So that's what happened. So the only place left is the small, old apartment I used to live in. I don't feel sorry for her at all. Instead of having a tough career woman like Sandra, I thought I'd have a sweet daughter-in-law and grandchild, and a brand new house. I thought my old age would be secure. I wish she'd stop speaking ill of others while feeling sorry for herself. Who does she think she's calling tough? You are the one who is such a mess that I had no choice but to take charge. Oh, I'm so down. Sorry, but I'm going home to tell Dad everything. Veronica seemed to have snapped. That would be. If my dad gets mad, it's going to be a big problem. You better take responsibility. Veronica, please, anything but that. So why did Timothy get this young valley girl pregnant? She was a company clerk, and after a drinking party, they slept together, and she got pregnant the first time. I thought she was just an employee, but she was actually the factory manager's only daughter. She was a private school-raised lady with zero experience with men despite her flashy appearance. He was her first, and of course, she didn't know he was married. The classic cheating line. My wife and I are estranged. We're getting a divorce soon. She believed him and even prepared divorce papers for him to take. She seemed like she would be a very considerate, good wife. Congratulations and best wishes. So, that's that. Do whatever you want. Wait. Timothy clung to the door to keep it from closing, and it was frightening. Sandra, don't you have any maternal instincts? What do you think about the new life that's coming? Sandra, if you can't give alimony, I'll take this house as a baby gift, I said to the desperate Timothy and Joanna with a big smile. Congratulations. Goodbye. I shut the door mercilessly and locked it. I thought I would leave the rest to my lawyer, but it wasn't that easy. After all, people who demand someone else's house aren't going to back down easily. As for the hateful texts from Timothy, I could just reply, "Please go through my lawyer," and then ignore the rest. But the problem was Joanna. Her long voicemails were truly annoying. Because of that woman, I'm a homeless old woman. Can't you at least arrange another apartment for me? This house feels cramped and stifling. When I asked my son's wife to do the chores, she said, "Why don't you do it?" What am I supposed to do now? I'd love to delete these messages right away, but they might come in handy, so I decided to keep them. Her demands might escalate. She's such a shameless person. One day, an unwelcome visitor showed up at my house. The doorbell rang without any prior notice, so I thought it might be Timothy or Joanna and considered preparing to call the police as I held my smartphone and went to answer. Standing there was a tough-looking man with a sharp gaze. I braced myself. I felt like I had seen him somewhere before, but I couldn't possibly know someone this intimidating. Could it be a scam disguised as door-to-door sales? Who is this? This is Rodney Millward, the factory manager. A thought crossed my mind. The factory manager of Veronica's father. Come to think of it, I'm going to tell my dad. That valley girl did say. Timothy and Veronica peeked out from behind the factory manager, giving creepy smiles. They've brought some strong backup with them. Dad, tell them off. Rodney, make him pay. The factory manager pursed his lips and furrowed his brow, looking quite angry. What if he demands compensation or covers the childbirth expenses? I decided to call the police, and just as I looked at my smartphone, I must apologize. Excuse me? The factory manager bowed deeply in apology. I am truly sorry. Then he grabbed Timothy and Veronica, forcing them to apologize. Apologize. Apologize sincerely. What? It hurts. My neck is breaking. Dad, why? This wasn't part of the plan. I watched in stunned silence. What on earth is happening? Don't misunderstand. I brought you here to apologize to this person. What? I am truly sorry. I understand my daughter has taken your husband and demanded the house as well. Yes, that's correct. Timothy and Veronica began to panic. Dad, you knew? I knew. Everything you told me about being tricked and losing your home was all lies. Where did you hear that? Your mom told me everything. The factory manager gritted his teeth, his anger evident. He said Joanna had approached him. Since we're going to be family, let's get along in every sense. And tried to seduce him. Your daughter took my son from me. We should get along too. Just buy me an apartment room, and you can visit whenever you want. Of course, the factory manager politely declined. I was speechless. To think this was the real her. I am disappointed in you and your mother for saying such convenient things. That's not. I've been faithful to my wife. Don't mess with me. Stop it, Dad. You're scaring me. You too. What? I spoiled you because you were my precious daughter. Both of you are not needed in my factory. Go work at a very strict workplace and start over. What? The factory manager told my ex-husband this and then turned to me. Can you forgive us with this? Yes. But why go this far? I want to maintain a good relationship with you in the future. I stared at him, not understanding at all. Then it dawned on me. He was someone I had worked with several times during my sales days, the director of a client company. I apologize for not realizing. Now it was my turn to apologize. There was a business integration, and I am now managing a new factory. It's no wonder you didn't recognize me. I see. I couldn't believe it when I heard your husband was working at my factory. The factory manager looked away, troubled. Has he caused any trouble? His work attitude is poor. He doesn't learn his job, and he has been absent without leave. He's completely different from you. I could picture Timothy's unprofessional behavior, but it was too predictable to be surprising. As I was no longer his wife, I couldn't defend or apologize for him, so I just gave a wry smile. I intend to retrain him from scratch. He will never come here again. Timothy shrank, and Veronica looked displeased. You were good at training new employees, weren't you? Yes, I was very strict. I'll be cheering you on from afar. Even with the factory manager's efforts, it seemed difficult for Timothy to reform. He would have to change his heart and put in the effort himself. For the sake of the innocent baby who is about to be born. There is only one thing I regret. I wanted to correct the misunderstanding that infertility was my fault. There was a time when we both went to the hospital together to investigate the cause of our infertility. It turned out there was no problem with me, but Timothy was diagnosed with asthenozoospermia. It wasn't impossible to conceive naturally, but we were told it would be difficult. The fact that Veronica got pregnant from a single mistake with Timothy was either a miracle, a sign of their strong compatibility, or maybe the baby isn't even his. Such things don't matter to me anymore. The factory manager updated me on their situation during a work call. Apparently, the couple and Joanna had been living in that old, cramped apartment for a while. They had promised to save money for the baby and work hard, as a condition for eventually living together with Joanna, but Veronica soon found it intolerable. Of course, she did. Timothy probably didn't know since I was the one managing our finances, but living on his income alone would be tough, if not impossible. If the three adults lived freely without saving, the savings I gave him in the divorce would run out quickly. Veronica went back to her parents' house after giving birth and never returned. During this time, Timothy quit his job because he didn't like it anymore. Panicked, Joanna showed up at the factory manager's house. Give me back my son's wife. And give me back my grandchild. And take care of me. Causing a scene and involving the police, demanding. Pathetic. They're all too selfish. But since it no longer concerns me, I declined further updates. Factory manager, good luck. The new house is very comfortable. I worried about being lonely and what I would do if I got sick. Timothy was good to have around the house. But never once have I thought. It's the same as when I lived alone. I believed that a married couple should support each other, but Timothy was just leaning on me. Having a person who was unnecessary in my life gone doesn't cause any problems. 7 years later, my parents, whom I called from the countryside, live comfortably in the well-settled house. And an old colleague from the sales department lives with us, too. He used to compete with me for the top performance. Since I moved to the planning department, he missed our rivalry and wanted to see me sometimes. I felt the same way. After hearing about my divorce, he quickly asked me out, and now he's a reliable husband. He has been someone with whom I can freely express my thoughts. He's truly an ideal man. I look forward to spending many more years together. Come on, let's go! Get in quickly! Our family was busy preparing for my sister Amelia's move abroad for her studies. On the morning of her departure, I was abruptly woken up by my mom, who hurried me into a taxi. What? I thought we were leaving in 3 hours. Confused by the sudden change in schedule, I sat silently in the taxi, unable to say anything. Huh? Even though Mom was in such a rush, neither Amelia nor Dad were in the taxi. All right, please go ahead. However, Mom, who got in the taxi after me, didn't seem to care and the taxi started moving. The place we arrived at wasn't the airport, but my grandparents' house. Mom dragged me out of the taxi and rang the doorbell of my grandparents' house. My grandparents were completely shocked to see their daughter-in-law and granddaughter appear so early in the morning without any notice. But Mom didn't seem to care. Taking this child along is pointless, so I'm leaving her here, she declared and threw my luggage into the grandparents' house. Then, as she quickly got back into the taxi, all right, please take care of her. Unless it's a matter of life or death, don't contact me, she said and drove away. I was left standing there, stunned, as my world went dark. So, does being deaf mean I'm a burden? I thought that, despite my disability, we'd eventually understand each other as a family. The despair I felt at that moment was even more painful and heartbreaking than the day I lost my hearing as a child. I never thought she could do something so cruel. But from now on, you can truly do what you love, Charlotte. Grandma Sophia said this as she gently hugged my shoulders. I had things I loved to do, but it's impossible for someone like me. It's okay, Charlotte, you'll see. You can do it. Grandma kept encouraging me with her warm, embracing smile. My name is Charlotte Smith, 22 years old. I live with my grandparents, who have been my benefactors, while working at a job I love. Although I'm living a fulfilling life now, my childhood was far from smooth sailing. I started living with my grandparents when I was 13. Before that, I lived with my parents and my sister Amelia, who is 2 years older than me. In our family, starting at the age of 3, it was mandatory to begin piano and violin lessons. This was an unchangeable rule. The lessons were 7 times a week. Initially, they were 30 minutes each, but gradually increased to 45 minutes, then an hour. Before I knew it, my days were filled with music, leaving no time to play with friends outside of kindergarten. However, I never disliked it. Because I was always compared to my 2-year older sister Amelia, I was driven by the desire to surpass her one day. Moreover, I genuinely loved music. Once, I asked my parents if I could skip a lesson. This time, my friend is having a birthday party. They said I can come. So can I skip the lesson on Friday? Having never met friends outside of kindergarten, I was excited and asked my parents with joy. Dad, with a smile. Invited to a birthday party? That's great, he replied, which I took as permission to go. I felt increasingly excited. Yeah. We get to eat cake together and stuff, I remember answering enthusiastically. I had never been this happy since I started kindergarten. However, the next words from Mom would quickly plunge my feelings from heaven to hell. There's no way you're skipping your lessons. Stop talking nonsense and eat quickly. You'll have less practice time after dinner. What? But Dad just said, skipping lessons is not allowed. And you, don't confuse Charlotte with your words. Yeah, sorry. I left more than half of my dinner uneaten that day. Naturally, I couldn't focus on practice after dinner and got scolded by Mom 3 times as much as usual. As you can see from this episode, the one who held the reins in our house was Mom. Mom had dreamed of becoming a musician when she was young. However, she couldn't fulfill that dream and placed that hope on Amelia and me. Looking back now, Mom's expectations of us were abnormal. She enrolled us in a kindergarten affiliated with a music college, and after coming home, we had private lessons and self-practice 7 days a week. Instead of family vacations, we attended performances of famous public orchestras, and for birthdays or Christmas, we received CDs of renowned musicians or new music scores. Moreover, the living room was renovated into a lesson room, where we spent almost all our time except for eating, bathing, and sleeping. If we wanted to watch TV or read a book, we had to reduce mistakes in self-practice and finish the practice on time. But it was almost impossible to finish on time, so the days we got what we wished for were very few. I liked playing the piano more than watching TV, so it wasn't too hard for me, but Amelia struggled every day just to watch TV. However, she rarely succeeded and would shed tears of frustration when Mom wasn't looking. Seeing Amelia like that, I began to think, I have to get better for Amelia's sake, and I focused even more on my lessons. One day, when I was 4.5, Mom suddenly said, Amelia is more suited for the violin, so we'll stop her piano lessons at the end of this month. Instead, Charlotte will focus only on the piano from next month. If you master different instruments, you can aim for gold medals as a duo, and it will be glamorous when you become famous. She decided our paths without consulting us. I loved the piano, so I didn't mind, but Amelia, who also loved the piano, was quite shocked. Still, it wasn't allowed for us to voice our opinions to Mom. We just silently ran on the track laid out by Mom. An incident happened in our house when I was 5 years old. One morning I woke up with swollen cheeks and a high fever. I had contracted mumps. Getting mumps at such a crucial time before the competition. Well, as long as your fever goes down, you can still do self-practice. Thinking that way, Mom locked me in the lesson room for self-practice as soon as she confirmed that my fever had gone down with antipyretics. I feel dizzy and can't play well. But if I don't do it properly, I'll get scolded again. At that time, I couldn't even tell Mom about my health issues. A few days later, after my fever spiked again, an unbelievable change occurred in my body. Huh? Is Amelia not practicing today? One day, when I woke up, the house was completely silent. There was not even a single sound. Overwhelmed by an inexplicable sense of dread, I rushed down from my room on the 2nd floor to the living room where the practice room was located. Strangely enough, there was not a single sound during this time. It felt like a horror movie, filled with a creeping fear, as I burst open the door to the practice room. And there, I found them. Charlotte, please keep quiet during practice. Mom and Amelia were there, practicing as usual. Mom looked very angry at me for running down the stairs in such a hurry. However, her angry words didn't reach my ears at all. Because at that moment, I had completely lost my hearing. Noticing my strange reaction, Mom immediately sensed something was wrong and took me to the hospital. The diagnosis revealed that I had developed severe hearing loss as a rare after-effect of mumps. After the mumps were cured, my hearing improved slightly, but I still needed people to speak loudly and clearly for me to understand. Communicating with family and friends became difficult, and I couldn't hear the piano sounds I loved, plunging me into deep despair. But more than my own despair, Mom was devastated. I never imagined something like this would happen. But since it has, we have no choice. We'll just have to give up on Charlotte. Give up? What do you mean by give up? From now on, we'll focus all our efforts on Amelia. Luckily, we have 2 daughters. Even if Charlotte can't make it, as long as Amelia becomes a professional, it will be fine. I see. I understand. I'll follow your opinion. Soon after, I was forced to quit the piano that I loved so much. Without practice sessions, I was free, but with almost no hearing, I couldn't enjoy watching TV or playing with friends. And above all, not being allowed to touch the piano I loved was the hardest thing to bear. The following year, I was not accepted into the private elementary school I had planned to attend and was enrolled in a public school for the deaf. From here, I became a burden to my family. Mom attended all of Amelia's school events but ignored all of mine. When attendance was unavoidable, she would send my paternal grandparents to maintain appearances. But this was the least of it. Mom avoided taking me along for hotel stays for Amelia's competitions, our annual family trips which became concert attendances, and even daily outings like dining out. She constantly passed me off to my grandparents. My grandparents always welcomed me warmly, making sure I didn't feel miserable. In such a family environment, of course, no one in my family learned sign language for me. Unable to communicate with my family, I became increasingly isolated and withdrawn. The only ones who worried about me and helped me were, again, my grandparents. They attended sign language classes with me and learned sign language. Additionally, Grandma Sophia secretly learned lip reading and taught it to me. Thanks to their dedicated support, by the time I graduated from elementary school, I could manage to have conversations even with people who didn't know sign language. Around this time, I began to love my grandparents more than my real parents and wanted to cherish them above all. What solidified the rift between my parents and me was when Amelia was 15 and I was 13. I knew Amelia could do it. These days, it's crucial for musicians to have international experience. That's why we cut back on her lesson time to make her learn Italian. Now, the path to becoming a musician is finally open. On the night we received the acceptance letter from the overseas school, Mom was more cheerful than usual as she praised Amelia and announced that we would be moving abroad in a few months. This was the first time I learned that Amelia was planning to study abroad and that we would move once she was accepted. I can't believe they didn't tell me something this important. I can't read lips in Italian. Is sign language the same overseas? I won't be able to see Grandpa and Grandma anymore. As worry and anxiety piled up, I also felt a strange sense of relief. But at least they consider me part of the family. That's good. Thanks to my grandparents, I had developed a resilient spirit in the face of adversity, and I vaguely felt that everything would work out somehow. I thought, I can visit my grandparents once I become independent, and was able to face the move positively. A few months later, on the early morning of our departure day, Charlotte, wake up! We're leaving! What? No way! Did I oversleep? It was the first time since I lost my hearing that Mom had to wake me up. At that moment, I mistakenly thought I was 4 years old again, oversleeping for my morning practice, and I jumped out of bed in a panic. But I quickly realized it was just a misunderstanding. You won't wake up unless I talk this loud? My throat hurts. Come on, get ready quickly. We're leaving. Mom said this irritably, slamming the door behind her as she left. Her gaze lacked any expectation, affection, or concern for me. When I was a child, she used to look at me with such shining eyes. Living up to Mom's expectations had been very tough, but in any form, the love and attention she gave me back then felt strangely nostalgic and precious. As I looked around the empty room, I let myself reminisce a little about my childhood. Then, taking a deep breath, I slowly stood up. I'll find something new in the new place. I'll become someone Mom can be proud of again. As I put on the clothes I had prepared, I made a quiet resolution. However, my feelings were shattered in the next moment. Come on, let's go! Get in! When I went downstairs with my luggage, Mom, holding only her handbag, was waiting by the front door. What? Wasn't the departure 3 hours later? Though puzzled by the significantly different schedule from what I had been told, I was too scared to talk to the obviously irritated Mom. I was pushed into the waiting taxi outside. Huh? No one's here? Despite all the rushing, Amelia and Dad were not in the taxi. Okay, let's go. But Mom, who got in after me, didn't seem to care and had the taxi drive off. The place we arrived at was not the airport, but my grandparents' house. Charlotte, get out. You'll be living here, so unload your luggage and wait. Mom's words and actions at that moment gave me a bad feeling. No way! You must be kidding! This is too cruel! Hoping that the thoughts running through my head were just my imagination, I was too shocked to move. But Mom didn't care and pulled me out of the taxi, ringing the doorbell at my grandparents' house. Early in the morning, without any notice, the son's wife and grandchild just appeared, and the two of them were simply stunned. However, Mom didn't seem to mind. This child is pointless to bring along, so I'm leaving her here, she declared, throwing my belongings into my grandparents' house. Then, quickly getting into the taxi. All right, please take care of her. Unless it's a matter of life or death, don't contact me. With just those words, she drove away. And indeed, they moved overseas, just the three of them. Does being deaf mean I'm a burden? Is it because I can't become a musician that I'm being abandoned? Even though my beloved piano was taken away, even though I could no longer have proper conversations, even though I was no longer taken out, I thought we would eventually understand each other because we were family. Just earlier, I had decided to try my best once more to gain Mom's approval. The despair at that moment was more painful and sad than the day I lost my hearing. However, I didn't sink into depression again. That was thanks to my grandma, Sophia. I never thought she could do something so awful. But from now on, Charlotte, you can truly do what you love. What I love? Yes. Not because someone tells you to, but because Charlotte wants to do it. You had something you wanted to do, right? I did, but it's impossible for someone like me. It's okay. Charlotte, you'll see. You can do it, Grandma said, encouraging me with a gentle and encompassing smile. Encouraged by Grandma, I started playing the piano again. The sound of the piano, which I had not been allowed to touch for years, stimulated my remaining hearing to the fullest. I want to play the piano again. Just like back then. My shrunken heart exploded with growth. And from that moment on, my days filled with piano began again. 9 years later, I was a senior at a music college. Although it had been more challenging than usual to get in, I felt a sense of fulfillment and joy in a life where I loved music and could talk about it with friends who shared my passion. Also, since entering college, I had ventured into songwriting and composing, discovering the joy of learning music from new perspectives. When I was abandoned at my grandparents' house at 13, I felt like I had hit rock bottom, but thinking of it as the trigger that made me who I am now, it's not so painful. I gained enough strength and confidence to think this way. Everything was going smoothly. Then one day, something unexpected happened. Mom, who had been out of touch for years, appeared before me. Just like when she abandoned me 9 years ago, she suddenly showed up at my university without any notice. And when she saw me, she beamed with a completely different smile. "Charlotte! Congratulations on winning the international piano competition. You really are my child." She started to gush. I was bewildered and couldn't use sign language or speak. Then, Mom, misunderstanding something, grabbed my hands tightly. "Sorry to surprise you. I flew over as soon as I heard about you on the news." Saying this, she tried to hug me. I instinctively rejected it with all my strength. Mom let out a small "huh," but quickly returned to her beaming smile. "Thank you so much for fulfilling my dream of becoming a musician. Charlotte, you're amazing. From now on, I'll fully support you. I'll help with both work and personal life. Let's live together from now on," she said, approaching me. Mom's strange gaze pierced through me. I felt a chill run down my spine for the first time in my life. Just as I was desperately wishing to escape, I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder from behind. When I turned around, there was my college friend, standing with a worried expression. Using sign language, my friend asked, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I replied in sign language, "I'm troubled by a stranger talking to me. Can you walk me home?" My friend nodded vigorously, stepping between Mom and me. "We have plans to go out, so excuse us," she told Mom, then took my hand and led me away from the scene. Mom is likely still unfamiliar with sign language. She stood there in stunned silence. Was Mom always this weird? Thanks to living apart, I finally realized just how abnormal my mother was at this age. And for the first time, I felt I never wanted to be involved with her again. However, contrary to my feelings, a few days later, Mom showed up at my grandparents' house with Dad and Amelia in tow. "I'm sorry I startled you the other day. Actually, we're planning to return to America soon, so Charlotte, you'll be living with us from now on," Mom said, smiling brightly but still using her authoritative tone. Behind her, Dad stood weakly, and Amelia had her shoulders hunched, just like before. Pretending not to understand what she was saying, I remained silent on purpose. Then Mom started praising me out of nowhere. But the content was bizarre, talking about how my childhood's elite education bore fruit or how I inherited her genes, which allowed my talents to flourish even from afar. To make matters worse, she belittled Amelia, saying she failed at the violin and wasn't good at piano either, thus had no talent, calling it a waste of time and money. This kind of talk went on for over 10 minutes, and eventually, Amelia broke down in tears. Seeing Amelia like that brought back painful memories of when I lost my hearing at 5 and had my piano taken away. I felt a deep anger towards Mom, who was manipulating our lives for her own values. But Mom, too, was growing irritated by my silence. Still, she must have wanted to stay on my good side. With a creepy smile that only touched her lips, she started typing something on her phone. The screen read, "You're the best musician. That's why I came to get you." I deliberately responded in sign language. "I won't go with you." Unable to understand sign language, Mom forced a smile, her mouth twitching. She showed me the screen again, now saying, "Let's go home together." With a sigh, I typed on my phone, "I'm staying here because I'm worried about grandparents." Mom's smile vanished at my unsatisfactory response. But a few seconds later, she seemed to realize something and smiled again. Turning to Grandma next to me, she made an unbelievable suggestion. "That's it. We'll leave Amelia here from now on. That way, Charlotte can focus on her music, and I can fully support her. Amelia can finally be useful to the family. Mother, could you tell Charlotte that with Amelia here, there's nothing to worry about?" When Mom made her selfish proposal, I felt something snap inside me. Stop saying selfish things. I don't need support from a mother who abandoned me, and I have no intention of leaving this house. Don't ever show your face in front of us again. Before I knew it, I was shouting at Mom for the first time in my life. Mom, who had assumed no one could hear the conversation, and everyone else in the room fell silent for a moment. But even then, Mom didn't back down at all. What? You don't need support? That's impossible. Because you are my daughter. You are going to become a great musician with me. And pretending you can't hear, too. You're not a child anymore, so stop being selfish. I'm not pretending. I read the conversation from your lip movements. And not learning sign language to live with someone who is deaf is out of the question. Besides, you abandoned me 9 years ago, so don't act like a mother now. How dare you say that to your parent? It's your grandparents' fault. Fine, I'll correct that foul mouth of yours. Come on. Pack your things quickly. I'm not planning to live with you, and I have no intention of getting involved with you in the future. Please leave. There you go again. Fine, I'll pack your things myself. Mom, realizing she couldn't persuade me, started forcing her way into the house. I desperately tried to stop Mom, who was no longer capable of making rational decisions. Then, Grandma, who had been silently watching, stood in front of Mom with a phone in hand. With a slightly intimidating voice, she said, "If you insist on entering the house, I'll call the police for trespassing. And maybe file a restraining order too." Grandma, who I had only ever seen smiling gently, looked shockingly stern at that moment. Even Mom seemed to snap out of it. She sat down weakly. Why? Why is it turning out like this? And began to cry. Everyone, including Amelia and even Dad, just watched silently. In the end, Grandpa scolded Dad, saying, "You're making a fuss, so go home." Then, Dad, with Amelia's help, dragged Mom away. I wondered what Dad thought of us. Watching Dad's exhausted back as he left, a thought crossed my mind, but I felt like I would never get a chance to ask him. Grandma gently patted my shoulder with her usual gentle smile. "Do you remember when I said you'd understand someday?" she asked. I nodded slightly and said, "Yes." Then Grandma, with a faraway look in her eyes, said, "That is now. Children are not tools for their parents. Forcing them to do something almost never leads to success. You always had a talent for music. Even though you became deaf and faced difficulties, I believed you would overcome them because you're a hard worker." "Thank you, Grandma." I hugged Grandma tightly and cried just a little. I felt truly grateful to be their grandchild. It was a moment when I thought that from the bottom of my heart. Even after that, Mom persistently visited us, but we never responded. No matter how cold we were, Mom's desire for me to become a musician only seemed to grow stronger, as if it were worsening. One day, Dad unexpectedly visited my grandparents' house. When Grandpa asked, "Is something wrong?" Dad, looking worn out, replied, "I'm looking for Amelia." After Grandpa pressed for more details, he found out that Amelia's situation had become even more dire than before. "You can't even participate in the competition." "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm really sorry. I've dedicated my money, my time, my entire life. So why aren't you a musician yet?" Mom, who was obsessed with Amelia becoming a musician, had started to harshly scold Amelia for not showing any results. Amelia, who had endured more than enough until now, finally reached her breaking point with this latest incident. And then one day, she eloped with a man who had been coming in and out of our house as a piano tuner. She's only known him for a few months. She'll only end up suffering if she ran off with a man she hardly knows. That's why I thought I'd bring her back and talk some sense into her. Dad seemed genuinely worried about Amelia in his own way. But when I heard this story, I felt a strange sense of relief. I hope this means Amelia can finally start her own life. That's what I found myself thinking. In the end, Amelia remains missing to this day. Though it's very worrying not being able to confirm her safety, I can't help but wish she's found happiness somewhere far from Mom's reach. On the other hand, Mom, who had been abandoned not only by me but also by Amelia, reportedly shut herself in at home and started living like a recluse, according to Dad. Apparently, she would yell at Dad and throw things at him at every opportunity. Unable to endure such a life, Dad finally left, leaving behind only a completed divorce form. When she showed up at our grandparents' house in a panic, with a desperate look in her eyes. "Now I have no one but Charlotte. Please, give me Charlotte back." I was horrified when she said that. And realizing that Mom would never change, no matter what happened, made me feel so sad. Soon after Dad left, Mom started working to support herself, but none of the jobs lasted long, and she kept changing jobs. And every month, she would visit our grandparents' house and shout, "Give Charlotte back!" To protect my grandparents' lives, I made a bold suggestion. That was to move away. With my stable income as a professional pianist, I thought we could live safely and comfortably together. At first, my grandparents were hesitant, but when I expressed my feelings, they happily agreed to the move. So now, my grandparents and I live peacefully in an apartment in the urban area. With the move, we also sold my grandparents' land, so we will never return to that town. I felt like I had finally taken control of my life with this move. And it seemed the same was true for my grandparents. They were very happy with the peaceful days. Though both have grown older and need to visit the hospital more often, they never miss my concerts. And without fail, they would praise me. "It was amazing. That's our Charlotte." This moment makes me the happiest of all. I intend to continue cherishing my grandparents, who have always been there for me. And I secretly wish to give back the same amount of love they've given me. I'll give you a kid with developmental disabilities. Scarlett, my son's arrogant wife, said to me. A strong hatred for her stirring up inside me. She doesn't love her own children. She only sees them as tools for making money. My anger towards her reached its peak, and I decided to take my grandchild away from her. Then I'll raise her. I set the condition that she would never be involved with her child again, and arranged for an adoption. 10 years later, Scarlett, triggered by a certain event, came to regret her choices. My name is Grace. I work as a proofreader. A proofreader is someone who checks for errors in manuscripts and layout prints at publishing companies, like for books and magazines. My husband, Henry, is a film director. He's made a name for himself as a capable director, having worked on a wide range of projects from animations to suspense and horror films. We, a creative couple, had one son. He grew up splendidly, found a wonderful wife, and got married. They were blessed with children. But soon after the marriage, our son tragically died in an accident. Losing our only son, Henry and I were engulfed in sorrow. But perhaps it was even harder for Scarlett, our son's wife. At the young age of 33, she became a widow and raised her 2 daughters by herself. Moreover, the girls were twins, and the younger one, Mia, showed signs of developmental disabilities. Her sister is Emma. At the time, Mia's condition was diagnosed as mild, but as she grew, her symptoms became more evident, and now she attends a special education class at the same elementary school as Emma. Raising a child with disabilities is no ordinary task. Especially for Scarlett, who lost her husband so early, Her days must be incredibly hard. Of course, my husband and I try to support her in every way we can. She has a job, so during times like evenings when she can't take care of the kids, we take them in. Still, the hardships she's faced since our son's death are unimaginable. I am grateful to her. She truly cared for her children. Until she became obsessed with a certain man. Her personality changed after meeting this man. Grace, I'm taking Emma to her piano class, so I'll drop Mia off at your place. I should be there in about 5 minutes. That was a sudden, unexpected call. Previously, Scarlett used to check my schedule and show consideration, but lately, it's always been abrupt. She might know her piano class schedule in advance, yet she calls out of the blue, wanting to drop off Mia without any prior discussion. It's not just inconvenient for me, but for Henry as well, who has his own work. Scarlett, I think it's admirable how much you care for Emma. But if you're going to ask us to take Mia in suddenly every time, we have our own schedules too. Wait, aren't you off today, Grace? I saw on the calendar that you have every Tuesday off this month. Scarlett knew everything about our work and home schedule, as she often brought the kids over. It felt invasive, like being monitored. There are things we can only do on our days off. Please, don't just leave the kids with us without discussing it first. It's not that we don't want to take them. It's just a bit troublesome without any prior notice. I understand. I'll be more careful from now on. There was a brief pause, and Scarlett's reply sounded listless. Accompanying her perfunctory response was a faint clicking of her tongue. Before I could respond, she abruptly ended the call. Soon after, I heard Scarlett's car parking outside. Suppressing my exasperation, I got up from my chair to head to the door. Then, I overheard an unbelievable remark from the entrance. Mia, just go on to Grandma's by yourself. From the entrance, I heard Scarlett's condescending voice speaking to Mia, leaving me shocked and speechless. Moreover, I only heard the sound of the door opening once. Meaning, Scarlett didn't even get out of the car, she just told Mia something and then drove off again. Surprised by this unbelievable situation, I hurried to the entrance and found Mia left there alone. Mia. Where's your mom? Where did she go? Mia, not understanding the situation, looked at me with a puzzled expression. I placed my hands on Mia's shoulders, asking her what happened, but she just kept staring at me, puzzled, not attempting to answer my question. Grandma. Good evening. Mia is in elementary school, but she's delayed in speech, only able to communicate in 2-word sentences. She can't answer complicated questions, and when bombarded with them, she tends to get stuck. At this moment, not understanding my question, Mia, contrary to my anxious mood, just smiled sweetly and continued to look at me. Mia, where did your mom go? Shopping? Piano class? Which one? When speaking to her, I know I shouldn't get emotional. If I convey words in haste, she also gets affected and may panic. I took a deep breath to calm myself and, showing my fists alternately with my hands, I tried to make it easier for Mia to choose an answer. Thanks to that, she seemed to understand the question and pointed to the right fist I held out secondly, uttering surprising words. Piano. Went with Emma and a man. A man. Hearing this intriguing word, I impulsively asked her more questions. Is he Mom's friend? Emma's friend? No. Mom's favorite person. Seeing her talk happily made my heart ache. Scarlett left a daughter behind to go to Emma's piano class with a new man. But why leave only Mia? The answer would soon become clear. That night, after piano class was over and it was getting time for Scarlett to pick Mia up, she didn't show up at our house. Fortunately, the next day was Saturday, so having Mia stay over wasn't a problem, but it was still incredibly rude. Scarlett left her with us without any notice. What's happening to her? I kept repeating these complaints in my mind while waiting with Mia for Scarlett to pick her up. Little did I know then, Scarlett's life was spiraling out of control. Hello, Grace? Sorry, but could you let Mia stay over tonight? Emma has come down with a fever. I don't want Mia to catch it, so could you look after her? It was past 9 p.m. I had finished giving Mia a shower and dinner, and was just waiting for Scarlett to pick her up when she called. Scarlett's voice on the phone didn't sound hurried, just apologetically casual. If I hadn't known the situation from Mia, I might not have doubted her words. But, having heard Mia's earlier story, I couldn't easily believe Scarlett. All right. We'll take care of her tonight. Realizing my reluctance, Henry, who was playing with Mia, turned to me and said so with a stern expression. I relayed to Scarlett that we would take care of Mia just for tonight. I understand the situation. But you knew about this sooner, right? How many hours has it been since piano class ended? Sorry. I was just about to pick her up when she started looking unwell. I'll be more careful next time. Her nonchalant reply only increased my anger. From now on, please make sure to contact us in advance. If not, we might find it difficult to take her in the future. Yes. Thank you so much. She responded sweetly and ended the call unilaterally. Dumbfounded and speechless, I returned to Mia and Henry, and that's when things got tough. Mia, how about spending today with Grandpa and Grandma? Your mom can't pick you up because she's taking care of Emma who's sick. Maybe the way I said it was not good. Mia, having already decided in her mind that she was going home, got upset when her routine was disrupted. Mia, in a state of panic, began to wander restlessly around, crying and repeating that she wanted to go home. She curled up on the spot, trying to calm herself down, but it seemed she couldn't switch off her emotions. Sitting down, then standing up, repeating this over and over, she eventually collapsed onto a nearby sofa and started to cry intensely. I'm sorry, it's my fault. It's okay. Let's just be there for Mia right now. We've encountered situations like this several times before. When she was younger, her tantrums were much worse, becoming so violent that she was uncontrollable. She would hit herself against walls or slap her hands on the floor, a far worse state compared to now. As she grew, perhaps maturing, her symptoms seemed to stabilize, now manifesting as crying intensely on the sofa. When Mia gets like this, both Henry and I stay by her side, never intervening or trying to do anything forceful. Mia, in her way of calming down, uses our hands to wipe her tears, seeking comfort through physical touch. But we don't initiate it. Mia has her own timing and needs. We've learned over these 6 years it's important to respond to her in that manner. I'm sorry. When Mia calms down, she always apologizes to us, perhaps thinking she'll be scolded for crying. Her eyes, wet with tears, stare at us, trembling with fear. At that moment, we had no idea that this behavior was a result of Scarlett's treatment. We're not mad at you. In fact, I'm sorry, Mia. I said something hard to you. Good girl, good girl. Though she might not understand my words, she seemed to read my emotions from my expression. Mia, kneeling in front of me, gently stroked my hair. Even if her words are limited, her heart is so kind. What does a disability matter? It's just a part of who she is, her unique character. I love this gentle side of her. Thinking this and smiling, I heard Henry's voice suggesting it's time to sleep, and Mia, now ready to switch to bedtime mode, happily went with Henry to the bedroom. The next morning, a grim-faced Emma and Scarlett in a slovenly outfit arrived. Thank you for yesterday. Emma's fever seems to have gone after sleeping all night, which really helped. Scarlett said in a manner as if a heart emoji should be at the end of her sentence, without a hint of remorse. Next to her, Emma looked upset for some reason. Curious, I was about to speak, but Mia, seeing her mother, lit up and rushed to embrace her, leaving me with no choice but to keep quiet. Mom, you're back. Mia. I'm back, let's go home. Scarlett spoke to Mia as she hugged her. At that moment, I felt something off in Scarlett's smile. For a brief moment, it seemed like a look of laziness towards Mia. It was so brief that I couldn't be sure. Was it just my frustration from yesterday making me see things, or was there really something off? Unsure of the fleeting feeling, I couldn't confront her about it. Then, we'll visit again soon. As Scarlett said this and took Mia's hand heading to the car, an angry-looking Emma handed me a letter. "Read this after we leave," Emma whispered, passing me the letter discreetly, making sure Scarlett didn't hear. Sensing something was seriously wrong, I took the letter without asking any further questions. After Scarlett left, I called Henry into the living room, and we read Emma's letter together. It contained shocking information. Mom changed after finding a new boyfriend. She's hardly home and gives money to this man. She's using the prize money I won from a piano competition and a concert to pay him. She's leaving Mia with Grandma and Grandpa because this man has started to dislike Mia and finds her annoying. She sees me as a tool to earn money through piano. Soon, Mom might push Mia onto Grandma and Grandpa permanently. I'm okay, but please look after Mia. I was stunned and speechless at the unbelievable content of the letter, and at the end of it, I noticed what appeared to be a mobile phone email address. I remembered Scarlett mentioning that Emma's piano talents blossomed when she entered elementary school and that her lessons had become busier. Emma, even as a young child, had gained media attention for her skills and had now become a piano prodigy, attracting nationwide attention. Things have become rather dangerous lately, so I decided to give her a mobile phone. It seems normal these days for elementary school kids to have one, and I thought it wouldn't be a problem. If she's receiving media attention, it's a natural concern and precaution for a parent to have. I remember hearing this story and thinking how times have changed. This email address must belong to Emma's mobile phone. Emma is quite a smart girl. If she's written down her mobile phone address, it means she isn't being monitored by Scarlett. It must be safe to contact her there. Believing this to be Emma's address, I decided to reach out. Good evening. Is this Emma's address? Yes, it's me. Thanks for reading my letter. Grandma, please help Mia. I received this reply after 10 p.m. Probably just as she was going to bed. I then exchanged several messages with Emma. Tell me more about what's happening. Make sure to delete our messages afterward. Of course. I wasn't really sick yesterday. It was all a lie so Mom could go see her boyfriend. I was left at a friend's house, and Mom went out with him. He seems to be in a band, and Mom's always following him around. She's using the money I earn from piano competitions to spend time with him. I don't really mind, but Mia, she's treated terribly at home. Mia doesn't understand and always smiles, but after being scolded, she cries a lot and is inconsolable. Mom prioritizes her boyfriend over us now. She's happy when I give her money. But as long as Mia is around, Mom will continue to treat her horribly. The boyfriend even said to leave Mia with you and Grandpa. Mia might be happier with you. So please, help Mia. I'll do anything for her. Reading the message to the end, I couldn't stop my tears. Such a young girl, only 6 years old, desperately trying to protect her sister. Especially since she's the same age as her. Sacrificing herself without a second thought. What a terrible mother to make such a young child feel this way. What are you planning to do? You could be in danger too. I'll be okay. Mom needs me as long as I can play the piano. If it gets too much, I'll threaten to quit. I want to become better at piano. If that means using them to my advantage. That man seems well connected in the industry, so I'll use that to my advantage. So don't worry about me. But please, take care of Mia. I can't protect her. Can she really be only 6 years old? Her maturity made me feel her strength. But we never know what might happen. Not to overdo it, to rely on us if things get tough. And to keep in touch without fail. And be careful not to lose contact. I promised her 3 things. I agreed to help Emma. A month later, Scarlett's irresponsible behavior continued, and we were constantly being inconvenienced. But we couldn't let anything happen to Mia. We even started to say that we wanted to take care of Mia ourselves to protect her and keep our promise to Emma. One day, Scarlett came to our house with Mia, asking for a favor. I might be going abroad soon. What? Henry, listening with me, also looked shocked. Emma's piano teacher thinks highly of her talent. She might get to study with a famous teacher in Italy. If she does well there, she'll become a world-famous pianist. That's why I came to ask if you could take care of Mia. It's impossible to take her abroad. I couldn't help but doubt Scarlett's story. Emma hadn't mentioned anything like this. There was no reason for her to keep such a big secret. I stared at Scarlett suspiciously. Can you take Mia upstairs? I need to talk to Scarlett alone. Henry seemed to understand from my expression. He took Mia and left the living room. Tell me the truth. What? Emma going abroad, such a sudden decision isn't plausible, is it? Also, the last time you left Mia with us, a friend of mine saw you walking around town with a man. If you keep hiding the truth unnecessarily, I'll have to take appropriate action. What's the real reason? Tell me the truth. The story about a friend spotting her was a lie. But I thought it necessary to shake her up. Fooled by my words, Scarlett revealed her true colors. If you already knew everything, you should have said so earlier. There was no need for such an act. What? Her sudden change in demeanor took me by surprise. Her tone and attitude were so unbelievable that I couldn't see her as the kind Scarlett I knew. To be clear, Mia is a nuisance. Just saying she has a developmental disability lowers my chances of remarrying significantly. Emma's success does offset that to some extent, but being a mother of a child with disabilities, nobody wants to associate with me. So, for my and Emma's happiness, I want you to take Mia. It's better for Emma to have a father, right? It would be good for my mental health too. Scarlett spoke nonchalantly, without a hint of remorse. I was speechless, unable to comprehend her words. She said something even more surprising. In short, I'm giving Mia to you. Emma is all I need. You are happy about having a grandchild, so it works out perfectly, right? She talked about Mia being a useless burden and a financial strain, laughing. I couldn't recognize her as a human being. Mia still loves her as a mother. Mia, so pure and earnest, loves her mother despite the terrible treatment. Thinking of Mia's feelings made me furious at Scarlett's attitude and words. But I didn't want to argue. For us, Mia is a precious remnant of our son. Rather than being raised by such a worthless parent, we wanted to take care of her and make her happy. Calming myself, I responded to her words. Then, I'll raise her. In return, you'll never see Mia again. I'll tell her that her mother has passed away. For her sake, never call yourself her mother again. Don't ever show up in front of her. Yeah. Do whatever you want. I'm happy to get rid of such a useless child. Scarlett said this, stretched her arms out wide as if relieved. And left our house without telling Mia anything. Thus, Mia came to live with us as our adopted daughter. Of course, the first few months were tumultuous. Mia was distraught over her mother's absence, causing a great deal of mental strain. We reached out to doctor acquaintances, invited specialists to our home, and collaborated with therapeutic institutions, focusing on her support. Thanks to that, a few months later, Mia returned to school and was able to live a more settled life. 10 years later. When Mia was in her first year of high school, an incident occurred. One afternoon, someone repeatedly rang our doorbell. It was a holiday, and we were spending time together as a family. Who could it be, ringing the bell so many times? Irritated by the rude visit, I went to the door and grimaced when I saw who it was through the peephole. I know you're there. Come out. Give back Mia, you thieving family. There stood Scarlett, whom we had cut ties with 10 years ago, and a flamboyantly dressed man. Possibly he is the boyfriend from the rumors. What's going on? The front door seems noisy. Henry. Scarlett found our house and has come to visit suddenly. What? We had moved to change our lives after cutting ties with Scarlett. We bought a place convenient for our jobs, never expecting she would find us. Henry and I exchanged looks, wondering what to do. It's okay, Grandma, Grandpa. Let them in. I want to settle things with that person. Mia was now 16. Her developmental disability had stabilized, and she could communicate normally. Though she still had intense fixations and could get absorbed in things, these traits helped her succeed in a certain venture. You're late. If you're inside, just let us in quickly. Scarlett had changed into a completely different person from the one who used to live with our son. As soon as she entered our house, she sat down next to a man on the sofa, crossing her arms and legs in an arrogant manner and glaring at us, clearly in a bad mood. Though her attitude was irksome, reacting to her provocations would only play into her hands. We took a deep breath to maintain our calm, sat across from her, and asked what this was all about. You have no business bringing strangers into my house. What do you want now, after cutting ties with me 10 years ago? Mia was sitting at a nearby workbench, busy with some writing. Fortunately, when she's in this focused mode, she doesn't hear anything around her. Knowing she wouldn't be bothered by our argument, we were told to have our discussion here. Glancing sideways at Mia, Scarlett smirked and arrogantly declared, "It's simple. I've come to take Mia back. She's my daughter, so it's my right to have her back, isn't it?" What is this woman talking about? Has she forgotten what she said that day, 10 years ago? Lost for words at Scarlett's absurd thinking, a stern-looking Henry addressed her in a low voice. You said you didn't want Mia and discarded her. We told Mia her mother was dead, and that should have been the end of it. That was just a verbal agreement. Besides, Mia knows I'm alive through the letters I sent her, right? If her mother is alive, there's no reason for us to live apart. Scarlett's defiant reply was infuriating. She had bombarded our home with letters once she learned of Mia's talent and even showed up at her school to make her presence known. Do you have any idea how much pain your selfish actions have caused Mia? Scarlett's actions had recklessly stirred up Mia's emotions. Believing her mother was dead, Mia was so disturbed by this revelation that she couldn't even go to school for a while. However, thanks to her friends and a certain child, she gradually recovered and was able to return to her normal life. I'm telling you, I'll take proper care of her from now on. So hand over Mia to me. Enough already. Scarlett, eager to justify herself and demand Mia's return, was interrupted by Mia herself. Mia threw a pen at near Scarlett's face, and she stepped up to Scarlett, shaking her fist in anger. You never cared about me. You dumped me with Grandma and others because I was in the way of your time with that man. And now you claim to be a mother? Don't make me laugh. To me, you're not a mother at all. We could never have imagined she would speak like this when she was little. She used to accept everything her mother did with a smile, never showing anger. But living with us, Mia had changed. She developed a rich emotional life, and thanks to therapy, her teachers, and friends, she learned to express herself. She even learned to distinguish right from wrong. In defiance of her mother, who had abandoned her, Mia honed a particular talent. So, she must not forgive Scarlett, who had chose the man getting along well over her. Scarlett didn't know how much I understood about Mia. She also didn't realize that she was being betrayed by a certain child. You're just greedy for money. I knew you'd show up sooner or later. After all, you know I'm the author of that movie. At those words, Scarlett's face showed a flicker of unease. After we took her in, we had Mia try various things. Scarlett had made Mia play the piano like Emma, but it wasn't for Mia. That was the real reason she considered abandoning Mia. We had heard about this from a certain child and encouraged Mia to explore her interests and take her to places she wanted to visit. As a result, Mia discovered a talent for something special. It was drawing. She had an exceptional artistic sense. Her imagination was beyond our expectations. As Henry and I, both of whom work in animation, recognize her excellent work. I tried showing it to a certain author. We even showed her work to a famous industry figure, who has an award named after him. His high praise led to her drawings being immediately adopted by my company's editorial department. She demonstrates stellar performance in drawing, which was made into an animated TV series and films in a flash. Now, I'm worth more than Emma. You thought you could use me to pay off the money you spent on that man and your ballooning gambling debts, didn't you? Too bad. I know all about your wrongdoings. Who would want to go back to a terrible parent like you now? Get out. My real parents are Grandpa, Grandma, and Dad. Scarlett was shaken by these unexpected words from Mia. Why did she know everything? We hadn't even talked about it, so how did she find out? In the midst of confusion and agitation, the man next to her was showing anger at being yelled at. What are you saying to Mother who gave birth to you? Did I ask to be born? You gave birth to me, abandoned me, and now you come back for your own convenience. I don't want to hear Mother from someone who's only interested in money. Who would go back to a greedy woman like you? Get out now. Just the thought of you makes me sick. Scarlett was speechless from the shock and surprise of being defied. The man next to her stood up in anger, about to grab her. Just as we stood up to stop him, a voice came from the living room entrance. If you do that, I'll show this video to the police and have you thrown in jail right now. Everyone turned to see Emma at the entrance, holding her mobile phone camera. She was supposed to be in Italy. Why is Emma here? Isn't she in Italy? I asked my teacher to reschedule my lessons. I thought you'd try to get in touch with Mia while I was away and bring her back to our house. I'm glad I kept in touch with her beforehand. As I thought, you came to Grandma and Grandpa's place. Emma said this and walked next to Mia, filming the man to protect him. Emma had explained everything to Mia and had always been there to protect her. She continued to use the man next to Scarlett. With his knowledge of the music industry, she might be able to meet the foreign pianist she admired. She wouldn't spare money to fulfill her dream. And she had a plan to leave Scarlett when the time came. This is my investment to fulfill my dream. It's not hard at all. They're so stupid. They don't know I'm secretly having Grandma manage the money. The reward money I give them is just a fraction, so don't worry. Emma, now a middle school student, began studying about money and law. She had grown up to be as knowledgeable as an adult, talking about her family situation at work and getting full support from the office. Thanks to that, Emma's bank account had enough savings to live on her own. She was finally ready for settling in Italy, which has been her long-cherished dream leaving Scarlett, so she talked to Mia about it in advance. I've been adopted by Grandma and Grandpa too. What? Scarlett was visibly confused by this unexpected turn of events. The man next to her hadn't anticipated this either. In a panic, he pressed Scarlett about what to do. After all the good times I've given you, you should be satisfied by now. I don't need trash like you around me as I become big. Emma and I have never considered you our mother, so rest assured. Don't ever show yourself to us again. We've already talked to Grandma and Grandpa about the adoption. All that's left is your consent, but we're prepared for a refusal and have already contacted a lawyer. I'm so happy to think I'll finally be able to live with Emma again. Well, I live in Italy, so we won't see each other often, but considering everything we've been through, it's easy, right? Now we can enjoy many things together again. Seeing them happy, I couldn't help but smile, and an infuriated Scarlett reached for my collar. You're the one! You filled Emma's head with nonsense. But Emma quickly turned her camera to Scarlett to protect her. Don't get the wrong idea. I made this proposal to Grandma and Grandpa on my own. You thought I was your ally, so you never suspected me. I always comforted you, didn't I? But I've never once thought of you as my mother. My parents are my deceased father, and Grandma and Grandpa, who still love us. Scarlett, who had never been defied by them before, looked like it was the end of the world. She sat down on the sofa in a daze, unable to accept reality. Mia has always longed for you. With Scarlett in such a pathetic state, I delivered the final blow. You rejected the love she repeatedly sought from her mother. You, drowned in men, have no right to call yourself a mother. I will take good care of Mia and Emma with Henry. Don't ever come near these kids again. You're no longer their family." Hearing this, Scarlett broke down in tears. She kept calling for Mia and Emma, but her pleas never reached them. As they asked to be kicked out, Henry turned Scarlett and the man away. "If you persist, I'll call the police." At this threat, they left the house scared. Since then, Scarlett and the man visited several times, begging to have them returned. But their persistence disgusted Mia, and she reported them to the police. Under the anti-stalking law, they were forbidden to approach Mia, ensuring her safety. Thus, they successfully severed ties with Scarlett. Their lingering feelings cleared, Mia and Emma lived freely. Emma became a world-famous pianist, met her destiny in Italy, and now performs concerts worldwide with her violinist lover. As for Mia, her movie adaptation was a global hit, making her a popular creator. We've been involved in her works and now support her life as a united family. Louise' house is ours now. Get out. After Louise, my father-in-law, passed away, my husband Dennis started claiming my childhood home for himself and his parents, saying things out of turn. Don't you guys know? Hearing Dennis' shallow words made me go beyond dismay to laughter. My retaliation against Dennis, who had looked down on me, sent his family to rock bottom. I am Madonna. I lived with my husband Dennis and my father Luis. My mother passed away when I was in high school, and afterward, my father raised me with a lot of love. I love my father dearly. When my father became elderly, over 70, and I was worried about him, Dennis readily agreed to live together in my childhood home. Are you sure this is okay? I can manage on my own, you know. My father worriedly said to me. What he was talking about was living together with me and Dennis. Recently, when I suggested to my father that I wanted to live together, he initially looked happy but then became concerned quickly. I appreciate it, but won't I be a burden on your and Dennis' life? My father always worried about me first. However, when I told him that I wanted to be with him and that Dennis had agreed, my father smiled and happily agreed. And today is the moving day for me and Dennis. We are unpacking the boxes that the movers brought in. Come on. You're saying it again. I told you before that's what I wanted, right? Yes, Luis. Plus, it's closer to work from here, and it helps me out too. My father smiled a little and said, I see, when Dennis and I told him this. After unpacking for a while, we went to the living room, where my father had made us warm coffee. I was about to have coffee when I heard someone coming down the stairs. I thought you might be taking a break, so I prepared some for you and Dennis as well. Tired, Dennis and I gratefully accepted and took a break, chatting with my father. Watching us, I felt our future life would be more enjoyable than before, which made me happy. After resting for a while, Dennis and I went back to our room to continue unpacking. Rolling up our sleeves, we motivated ourselves to push a little further. Hey, you can quit your job if you want. Stay by Louis' side. While working, Dennis made an unexpected suggestion. I stopped, surprised. What? What do you mean? Because, by living here, we've reduced the rent we used to pay. So, you could quit your job and take care of Luis, talk to him. It'd give you peace of mind, right? Currently, Dennis and I both work, and I handle the household chores. Dennis helps with the chores occasionally, but it's been quite busy nonetheless. I was a bit troubled by Dennis' suggestion and told him I'd think about it. Indeed, having more time to be with my father was appealing. And the thought of being able to focus on household chores seemed to lessen my burden. Dennis' proposal was attractive, but it meant relying on his income, which worried me about becoming a burden on him. Dennis had already agreed to the cohabitation. Could I rely on him even more? With our living situation changing from today, I decided to keep living as we had been for the time being. Dennis told me not to push myself, but the cohabitation was my suggestion. I felt I couldn't always depend on Dennis. A month passed. Hey, maybe you should quit your job for Louis' sake after all? When Dennis suggested this again, I was already considering it might be better. Living together had actually lessened my burden, not increased it. Because my father was helping with the household chores. Thinking of preparing dinner on my way home, I'd find my father had already cooked or cleaned, which seemed to increase his burden instead. Feeling guilty about this situation, I had been contemplating quitting my job. Yeah, maybe I will. I'm sorry to put the financial burden on you, Dennis. What are you talking about? Don't worry about it. With that, I decided to quit my job. When I told my father, he said he'd take care of the household chores and that I should not worry about working. But when I insisted that I wanted to do the chores, he thought for a moment and then agreed. Since quitting my job, I've been able to focus on household duties. Spending more time with my father has enriched our days. However, things gradually began to change. Welcome back. You must be tired today. Is dinner ready? Dennis started coming home late, and with my father already asleep by the time he returned, the three of us had fewer meals together. Today, I was watching TV with Dad and... Can you be quiet while eating? Oh, sorry. Dennis is as kind as ever when my father is around, but lately, he's become very cold when it's just the two of us. Thinking I might be burdening him since I quit my job, all I can do is apologize. After finishing his meal, Dennis gets up to prepare his usual after-dinner drink, then suddenly decides to leave the dining room. Where are you going? What about your drink? Shower. He says curtly and leaves, closing the door roughly behind him. Not knowing if he's just in a bad mood or tired, these days have been so continuous that I can't help but sigh. The next day, as usual, I wait for Dennis to come home after my father has gone to bed, but he doesn't return even after midnight. Worried, I try calling him, but he doesn't answer his phone. Just as I'm getting really concerned, a message arrives. What? Even the text feels cold. I sigh again, relieved that he's at least safe. Still at work? I was worried because it's so late. He responds quickly. On a business trip. The reply is short. But from this, I understand he won't be coming home today. I hadn't heard anything about a business trip and think he should have told me earlier, but I also worry that mentioning it might upset him more. So, you're on a business trip. Got it. When will you be back? I send this, but get no reply. After that, Dennis's business trips seem to increase. Without him telling me when he'd be leaving or when he'd return. My father worries too, and when Dennis is home, asks him if everything is okay. I'm totally fine. Just working hard for the family. Dennis responds with a bright smile he no longer shows me. Seeing this, I wonder if he's upset with me. I try to talk about it, but he dismisses it, saying he's just busy or tired, and we never really have a proper discussion. Eventually, Dennis hardly comes home at all. Suspicious, I start to wonder if he's having an affair when suddenly, I receive a message from Dennis's mother, Cecile, after a long time. Give me Dennis's company address. The message is blunt, without any greeting. Since the beginning of our marriage, my in-laws haven't liked me, often making snide remarks or harassing me, so over time, I've distanced myself from them, although Dennis understood and it never affected our relationship. But we never attempted to mend things, so the relationship remained distant. Puzzled by Cecile's abrupt message, I reply, It's been a while. May I ask why you need Dennis's company address? This seems to upset her, as she calls me, angry. Hello. It's been a while. It's not been a while. You've had Dennis looking after your father and quit your job to do no housework at all. What's this about? Because of you, Dennis has been staying at our house. He forgot something today and was going to drop it off at his company. And you're acting like this. Unbelievable. Give me the address now. Also, from now on, Dennis will be living with us. Stunned by Cecile's barrage, I learned Dennis had been going back to his parents' house on the days he said he was on business trips. Shocked that he had told his parents such things, I feel betrayed. Despite him saying it was okay for me to quit my job and to stay by my father's side, realizing Dennis's true feelings was heartbreaking. Unable to argue, I give Cecile Dennis's company address and hang up. Trying to calm down, I'm making coffee in the living room when my father comes in. Smiling as usual, I ask him, "Want some coffee?" He looks at me closely, smiles, and says, "I might just take you up on that." As we sit drinking coffee together, my father starts to talk. When your mom and I were younger, we used to argue a lot. Misunderstandings, miscommunications, but we always resolved them by talking honestly. Maybe couples who can argue and fix their relationship are better off, understanding each other more deeply and getting along better. Listening to my father, it feels like he sees right through me. His words resonate with me, and I decide to have a proper talk with Dennis. Yeah. Thanks, Dad. When I told my father, he laughed. Then, after receiving a message from Cecile, I sent Dennis a message saying I wanted to talk. However, Dennis replied that it was too much trouble, making me sigh. Who's making it troublesome? Anger towards Dennis started to bubble up. I wanted to reply impulsively, but I took a deep breath to remain calm. Maybe that triggered it, but Dennis stopped giving me money for living expenses. He wouldn't answer my calls anymore, and my messages about the living expenses were ignored too. His selfish actions were making my love for him fade. Was there any point in staying married? The thought of divorce crossed my mind. I was disillusioned with Dennis for being so irresponsible and selfish. But not wanting to worry my father further, I put the thought of divorce on hold and decided to use my savings from before I was married to get by. I had gotten used to life without Dennis, enjoying my days with my father. Then one day, my father collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, where I was told he didn't have long left. I broke down crying there, unable to comprehend the doctors' and nurses' words. When I went to my father's room, he was conscious, forcing a smile and apologizing for worrying me. I took his hand, trying my best to smile back despite my swollen eyes. "What kind of face is that?" My father laughed, looking sad, making me feel like crying again. Since my father would be hospitalized, I went home to prepare some changes of clothes. Alone at home, I started crying again. The house I grew up in, filled with too many memories, felt unbearable to be in alone. While I was crying, my phone rang. Thinking it was the hospital, I checked to find a message from Dennis. "We live separately now. Take care of your own living expenses. Why don't you use your father's pension?" The moment I read it, I threw my phone in anger. That was the moment my feelings for Dennis completely vanished. Shaking with anger and sorrow, I tried to calm down, wondering what my father would think of me now. Somewhat calmer, I washed my face and finished preparing to go back to the hospital. Just then, the mail arrived with news that seemed like a blessing to me at that moment. After seeing it, I firmed up my resolve, left the documents at home, and headed to the hospital. My father's condition worsened, and I realized our goodbye was near. I spent my days at the hospital laughing and talking with my father, and crying when I returned home. Eventually, my father passed away peacefully. I was able to watch his final moments as if he was sleeping peacefully. I was devastated but also grateful for everything he had left me. With my relatives' support, we managed to hold the funeral without issue, but Dennis and his parents never showed up. I hadn't informed them of my father's death, so I had no expectations. However, Dennis showed up days after finishing my father's posthumous affairs, nonchalantly with a lot of baggage. Long time no see. Luis passed away? Seeing Dennis, I felt a rush of anger, but managed to keep my composure. What do you want? What's with the baggage? No way to greet, huh? Isn't it obvious? Your husband is back. Also, this is my parents' stuff. Excuse me? Hearing the word husband from Dennis was extremely unpleasant. I couldn't believe someone who had left on his own, stopped contributing to our living expenses, and lived as he pleased dared to refer to himself as my husband. You were waiting for me, right? No job, struggling with living expenses, and having to take care of your father alone. Speechless with joy? Or rather, you fell for my plan. Dennis mentioned a plan that caught my attention, and I asked what he meant. The unbelievable response came back. Luis moving in? I hated that idea. Living with Luis? You must be joking. But if I said that, you might consider divorce. And if we divorced, I wouldn't get this house. So, I moved in with the act of a loving husband, made you jobless, to ensure you and Luis would depend on me. That way, this house would become mine. Hearing this, I found myself glaring at Dennis unconsciously. This is not something a normal person would think of. The shame of having married such a person, and the overwhelming guilt towards my father made me tremble with frustration. You say that yet you leave and stop providing for us. Isn't that contradictory? At that, Dennis began scratching his head, looking annoyed. Yeah, I reached my limit of patience. I never thought I'd be such a short-tempered man. But I thought you wouldn't have the courage to divorce, so my plan would still succeed even without me. His smirk made me wonder what I ever saw in him. I don't want to see his face or hear his voice anymore. Dennis had become physically repulsive to me. And so, my plan succeeded. This house might be old, but it's spacious and in a good location. It'll be worth a lot when sold. From today, I'll live here with my parents. It's rare to find someone so selfish. He must have never learned about morality. Well, considering his parents, it's not surprising. As I stood there in silent disbelief, Dennis, thinking I was shocked, added insult to injury. I'll take Luis's house. Get out. Watching the in-laws' belongings being moved in, I realized Dennis had no grasp of our situation. Dennis looked down on me with disdain. After his appalling comments about my father, I couldn't let this go. I found myself unable to hold back laughter at Dennis's ridiculous statements. Surprised by my sudden laughter, Dennis looked puzzled. Have you lost your mind? That's my line. The thought of confronting him with reality made me laugh uncontrollably. As Dennis began to rage, I ignored him and stated the facts. Do you guys not know? This is my house. It will never be yours. My words left Dennis frozen, and I went for the kill. Besides, you and I are strangers now. Haven't you heard from Cecile? Laughing, I watched as Dennis was left speechless, and then began to make a call. It seemed he was calling Cecile. Mom? Madonna's saying something nonsensical. We're not divorced, right? She said you should know. What's that about? What? You sent it? What have you done? Listening to Dennis, it seemed he was beginning to grasp the situation. Dennis ended the call with a twisted face. You filed for divorce? Yes. Exactly. The day your father was hospitalized. Cecile sent the completed divorce papers by mail, and I was so happy I sent them back the next day. Cecile did something nice. Darn. Even if it arrived, you shouldn't have sent it. Mom said to write it just in case. I never intended to divorce. Well, you filled it out, didn't you? I don't know about your intentions. I just granted your wish for divorce. You should be thanking me. Seeing Dennis so frustrated was satisfying. Cecile must have sent it to harass me, but to me, contemplating divorce that day, the arrival of the divorce papers was great news. Afterward, Dennis, panicking about property division and claiming rights to the house because he moved in with my father, was easily rebutted. Knowing there wasn't much to divide since the property wasn't valuable and was in my father's name at the time of the divorce, I explained it wasn't subject to division. When Dennis desperately claimed my personal savings from before our marriage should be divided, I clarified that too was not subject to division. Dennis turned pale, unable to respond, his mouth moving like a goldfish. I was tempted to mock him further, but I composed myself for a more mature response. Can we stop this now? Bringing so much stuff into someone else's house is troublesome, and frankly, it's trespassing. If you plan to stay any longer, I'll have to call the police. When I said that, Dennis hurriedly started moving his things out and left as if fleeing. I closed the door and, looking at a photo of my parents, murmured, "This is for the best. I'll become stronger, so watch over me." Thinking about whether my parents had reunited in heaven eased the sadness, and strangely, the loneliness dissipated. I gathered my resolve and started looking for a job. Just then, a friend contacted me. They had heard I was job hunting and reached out. They had a job in mind that suited my expertise. I was introduced and interviewed by HR, and was hired on the spot. A few days later, Dennis sent a message. I was stubborn last time, my bad. I actually wanted to make things right with you, that's why I came to the house. Knowing it was all lies, I struggled with how to respond, eventually finding it too bothersome and choosing to ignore it. Despite my silence, a series of poem-like messages began to arrive. We were like the sun and moon back then. I reached out but couldn't touch you. Those days of struggle are now memories. We can be within reach now, right? I can't go on without your love. Won't you give me that glowing love once more? My life is yours. You mean everything to me. Our love is eternal. No matter where, I will continue to love you. Your heart is where I belong. Each time a poem arrived, I showed it to my colleagues, wondering if it could be used for work. I work in editing. Sometimes, phrases like these can be useful. Ah! Here comes the emotionally unstable stalker. Great material when I'm out of ideas. Dennis has become a source of content, unbeknownst to him. But his messages only fill me with disgust, so I don't reply. Then one day, the doorbell rang. Peeking through the peephole, I saw Dennis. Thinking he had finally escalated to a direct approach, I called the police immediately. Hey! I know you're there. I can see your car. Please, just hear me out. I'm really in trouble here. There was talk of moving into this house, and my parents seem to have sold our family home. I have nowhere to go. Please help. Despite his pleas from outside, it's a stranger's problem to me, not mine. Didn't he realize this wasn't his home when he didn't retract his claim after finding out? The messages sent showed he hadn't given up, but his and his family's naivety was astonishing. Soon, the police arrived and had to persuade Dennis, who resisted fiercely and was eventually taken away. Messages continued to flood in, and when I ignored them, my in-laws began contacting me. Initially, they called, but as I ignored them, they resorted to messaging. "How could you know we're in trouble and not help? Call us back immediately. Why not have a proper discussion once? We were family, after all. Isn't this too cold? We had to sell our home because of you, now living in an old apartment. Why won't you vacate the house? You received an inheritance from your father, right? We quit our jobs, expecting not to struggle. Take responsibility." Herman, my Raphael, said this, and it was clear the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Did they really think their decisions would just work out? Their messages were infuriating. How much more could they belittle people? I had planned to ignore them, but ended up blocking Dennis and my in-laws. I considered changing my contact information, but didn't want to go that far because of them. I was at my limit of patience. After blocking them, I hoped for a peaceful life, but my expectations were naive. Later, my former in-laws showed up at my house. As much as I wanted them to stop, being known made such situations inevitable. Yet, leaving this house full of memories was unthinkable. "Come out already! Don't you know we're in trouble? Fix your mood already. I'm saying we should get back together. Ignoring someone in trouble is questionable behavior for anyone." The doorbell kept ringing. The front door was being pounded on. I had called the police without mercy, but then suddenly, the noise stopped. Curious, I looked through the peephole and saw a man, familiar somehow, arguing with my former in-laws. More than talking, it seemed like a confrontation. "You're causing trouble. Go home, all of you." The former in-laws were unsettled by the sudden appearance of the man. "What did you say? Who are you, anyway? Could you be the affair partner?" Despite being taken aback, the former in-laws retorted, to which the man responded with a look of disdain. "That kind of thinking is why nobody takes you seriously. Do you see your surroundings? This is a residential area. Look, your disturbance has drawn a crowd. It's really loud." Although I could only see so much through the peephole, indeed, neighbors had started to gather. "This is embarrassing for me too," I sighed. However, realizing their predicament, the former in-laws started panicking, stuttering. But. By then, the police had arrived. It seemed one of the officers had been here before, as they recognized Dennis and said, "You again?" Hearing this, the former in-laws' faces turned bright red. "Do you realize how much trouble you're causing? Have some shame," the man said before leaving. Internally, I thanked him, feeling a bit relieved. Afterwards, the former in-laws were escorted away by the police amidst onlookers, who then dispersed. Hours later, the doorbell rang again, and peering through the peephole, I saw the man who had confronted my former in-laws. Surprised, I hesitated but eventually, cautiously opened the door to find the man smiling at me. "It's been a while. If you were back, you should have told me." Though the man looked familiar, I couldn't place him until he offered a clue. "Can't remember? Well, it has been over 10 years. It's me, Charles." Hearing the name jogged my memory. My childhood friend Charlie, or Charles. "What? Charlie? Now that you mention it, I can see the resemblance." Charles was a childhood friend who lived next door, but we hadn't seen each other since he transferred to a sports-focused elementary school. Remembered, huh? I've moved back home too. So, we're neighbors again. That's amazing. It's been so long. And thank you for earlier. You really helped me out. As I expressed my gratitude again, Charles laughed. Don't mention it, he said, making me smile in appreciation. Caught up in nostalgia, our conversation grew lively, and I shared the recent events with him. Charles offered his support anytime, giving me a strong ally. Upon learning of my father's passing, Charles brought flowers as a tribute. He remembered my father, even though we were just kids back then. I was delighted to have someone with shared memories in my life. Later, I received a letter from a lawyer in the mail. Without any clue what it was about, I opened the envelope to find several papers inside. The documents claimed I had committed adultery during my marriage and demanded compensation. What is this? I wondered, noticing an unread message on my phone. It was a message from an address I didn't recognize. The message, from an unknown address, stated that my ex-husband, Dennis, had filed a lawsuit for adultery during our marriage. It threatened to inform my workplace unless I admitted guilt and settled immediately. Knowing no legitimate lawyer would send such a letter, it was clear this was the work of my former in-laws. The letter's authenticity was doubtful, so I decided to consult a real law firm. A genuine lawyer confirmed the letter was a complete fake. The supposed lawyer's name was unregistered, confirming my suspicions. Though I considered ignoring it, I decided to feign falling for their trick. I've reviewed the content, but I can't recall any such incident. If you're accusing me of adultery, please provide evidence. You seem... But the emotional damage to Dennis is substantial, and the claim is for compensation for that. No lawyer would proceed without evidence. It was clear they were operating on scant knowledge. There's no fact of infidelity, so of course, there's no evidence. You mention emotional damage, but do lawyers act on such baseless claims? Dennis's plight has moved me, and I've taken on your case with the intention of helping. If you show some sincerity, we don't intend to make a big deal out of this. Quite an emotional lawyer, aren't you? Just to confirm, though you're probably aware, it's illegal for someone to impersonate a lawyer, with potential jail time or fines depending on the case. You are a real lawyer, right? After that exchange, the previously prompt replies stopped. Wondering what their next move would be, I received a message. Of course, I'm real, but I've been persuaded by your passion. We've decided to drop the lawsuit. No, don't bother dropping it on my account. I have no such passion, quite the opposite, in fact. Since you've fabricated this affair, I'm inclined to fight this fully and am considering hiring a lawyer myself. I look forward to seeing you in court. After my reply, there was no further contact. Though the messages stopped, the former in-laws again made a direct assault, screaming at my front door about how they were wrong and begging me to drop the lawsuit. Awoken by the commotion, I checked the time to find it was past 1 a.m. Frustrated and at my limit, I yelled, "Enough! Stay away from me forever!" as I flung open the door. The former in-laws, having never seen me so enraged, were stunned. Toxic family. Try anything else, and see what happens. Saying this, I grabbed my father's wooden sword that was by the door. Seeing the sword, the in-laws' faces turned pale, with Dennis muttering an apology. If you're sorry, then disappear. Don't ever come back. I yelled even louder, causing Cecile to tear up, looking like she might cry. Then, I saw police car lights approaching, indicating that the neighborhood had called them due to the late-hour disturbance. As they were taken away, Cecile desperately pointed at me, telling the police, "That person! They tried to hit us with a wooden sword." When the police turned to me, asking if that was true, I explained, I was just startled by the incessant doorbell ringing and knocking, thinking it was an intruder. I had the wooden sword for self-defense. The officers seemed convinced. Charles, who had been nearby and witnessed their frequent assaults, vouched for me. His testimony, along with their malicious behavior, led to their swift arrest. It was finally quiet. The next day, encouraged by Charles, I filed a complaint. Given the repeated police incidents, it was smoothly accepted. Charles had noticed the previous day's commotion and had come over, hearing my shouts. He later joked about how terrifying I sounded. Eventually, the former in-laws were issued a restraining order, halting their attacks. Moreover, someone had recorded the commotion and posted it online, leading to neighborhood gossip. Unable to move due to financial constraints. They likely live off the grandparents' pensions. As for me, my relationship with Charles quickly evolved, and after a few months, we started dating following his confession. Spending time with Charles, always making me laugh and showing kindness, felt incredibly fortunate. I'm thankful every day, considering it a blessing from my father. How could you do this? Sullivan bought my favorite pizza for tomorrow's discharge celebration. And you threw it in the trash. That's terrible. Rosie, my mother-in-law, said this as she glared at me intensely. I also wanted her to enjoy the delicious pizza to her heart's content. But that was an impossible wish. If you say so, please look inside then, I said with a stern face. Rosie looked at me curiously and then slowly opened the box. Right after, Rosie's body started to tremble. My name is Cindy. I'm a 35-year-old office worker. I met my husband Sullivan through a friend's introduction, and we've been married for 2 years. Both Sullivan and I love our jobs, and after discussing it together, we chose not to have children. Friends with children had sometimes worried about the pressure from the mother-in-law. But to me, that concern seemed unnecessary. Of course, there's a reason for that. The apartment we live in is about a 15-minute drive from my in-laws' house. Rosie lives there alone since her husband passed away 5 years ago due to illness. When I first met Rosie, I told her, I want to continue working even after getting married. Rosie really liked that about me. It's wonderful to be an independent woman. Oh, I'm relieved. I was a bit worried Sullivan might become just an ATM. I'm glad he married someone so capable, she said with a beautiful smile. I quickly grew fond of Rosie, who was talkative and cheerful. My husband and I moved to our current home a year ago. It was a quick decision based on location and rent because we were busy with work. Because of that. Hey, Cindy. This faucet is old, shall we talk to the real estate agent about it? Sullivan suggested to me, pointing at the dripping faucet. Oh, that. I'll contact Mariah about it. Oh. Sorry, I have to go early this morning. I'm leaving now. Mariah is a friend from my university days. I coincidentally met her working at a real estate agency, and she was very helpful in our search for a place. She seemed uninterested in marriage, enjoying her single life. Since reuniting, Mariah and I would have lunch during breaks, and sometimes Sullivan would join us at a pub after work. I loved those times, but Sullivan started coming home late more often as he became responsible for training new employees. Recently, you have been working a lot of overtime, I remarked, to which Sullivan sighed. There's this new employee, Emily. She's slow to catch on, and it's been tough. That sounds hard, I replied while we continued our peaceful married life. Then, we received news that Rosie had been involved in a traffic accident and was hospitalized. Rushing to the hospital, we found her lying in the bed, looking pained. I was walking home from shopping when a car suddenly crashed into me. Can you believe it? And now I have to stay in the hospital for a month. Oh no. Tomorrow was supposed to be my monthly pizza day, Rosie lamented. She had been looking forward to her monthly pizza outing with friends at a local pizzeria. Despite having a broken arm and leg, she seemed in good spirits, which was a relief to us. As Sullivan was busy with work, I made sure to visit Rosie as often as I could. However, she would become gloomy during meals. "It's no use. I can't taste anything," she said, apparently having lost her sense of taste and smell due to the accident. But the doctor said it might be temporary. I tried to cheer her up, and she smiled. "Right. I hope it gets better before I'm discharged. I want to enjoy pizza again." We laughed together at her playful remark. I kept Sullivan updated on her condition. But my frustration peaked as he continued to use work as an excuse not to visit her. "Hey! I get you're busy with work, but this is too much, isn't it? It's not even a busy season at your company, right?" I questioned, bewildered. He sighed deeply. "Like I've said before, it's tough training the new employee, Emily. Don't make me repeat myself," I countered. "It's been half a year since you started training her? If Emily is that incompetent, maybe she's beyond your help. You should talk to your boss." As I pressed on, Sullivan ruffled his hair. "Enough. Don't meddle in other people's business." He then retreated to the bathroom. Other people's business? Knowing he couldn't win the argument, Sullivan always escaped to the bathroom whenever things got inconvenient, waiting until my mood improved. This was one aspect of him I disliked even before we got married. Despite the strained days, I always visited Rosie on my days off. Though her taste hadn't returned, and she often looked disheartened, the news from the doctor that she would be discharged the following week brought her great joy. A few days later, I entered her room as usual and noticed Rosie in high spirits. "Just now, Sullivan came to visit and look. He brought me pizza from my favorite place." Seeing Rosie so happy, my face turned pale. I quickly snatched the box from her and threw it into the trash can. Rosie was shocked by my sudden action, but she raised her voice. "How could you do that? Sullivan bought my favorite pizza for tomorrow's discharge celebration. And you threw it in the trash. That's terrible." She glared at me fiercely. "But you can't eat this, not this one," I insisted. "Just give it back to me," Rosie demanded. "If you insist, please look inside," I said, and she slowly opened the box. I had a story to tell her. After I finished, her body began to tremble. The next day, I went to a certain place. "What are you doing here?" I saw several men and women standing in front of me. One of them, noticing me, exclaimed, "What?" In a barely audible voice, he started. "But why? I mean, yesterday." I confronted him. "Did you think I knew nothing? What are you planning to do with your family home, Rosie's house?" As I raised my voice, Rosie, standing next to me. "Answer me, Sullivan," she shouted. The truth is, I had lied to Sullivan the day before. Rosie was supposed to be discharged tomorrow, but she got terrible food poisoning. The hospital just called to say her discharge is postponed. Did she eat something strange? I'm worried. Hearing my words, "That's terrible. Well, she gets to rest a bit more in the hospital, huh?" Sullivan replied, seemingly pleased. That's when I became certain. "By the way, did you properly take out that pizza from the fridge for this morning's trash?" Sullivan sometimes brought home gifts like snacks from clients. About a week ago, I found a large box in the fridge. I didn't pay much attention, thinking it was just another snack. But after a few days, I started noticing something odd in the fridge every time I opened it. "What? What's this smell? It stinks!" I searched for the source and realized it was coming from that box. It had a fishy and unpleasant smell. Wasn't this a snack? I confronted Sullivan when he got home. "Oh, I forgot. That's a pizza someone gave me. The boss ordered pizza for lunch and treated everyone, but I didn't have time to eat." Thinking back, Sullivan's explanation sounded prepared. "Make sure you take this out tomorrow on trash day." I told him before heading to the bedroom. The next morning, I went to the kitchen, sleepy-eyed, and saw the same pizza on the table. Approaching it, I grimaced at the foul smell. When Sullivan woke up a bit later, "Hey, did you leave this out all night?" I asked him. "I left it out because I thought I might forget to take it out. Eating that would definitely upset someone's stomach." We shared household chores, and taking out the trash was his responsibility. Looking at his laughing, I left for work with a look of disbelief. That day, during my lunch break, I went to visit Rosie. But when I entered her room, I was shocked. The pizza that had been giving off a foul smell just that morning was right there in front of me. Worse, Sullivan had brought it. It was a week-old pizza, left out at room temperature during the heat of summer. Anyone would know eating it would be disastrous. Panicked, I grabbed the box from her and threw it into the trash can. Rosie scolded me, not knowing anything, but after I explained, she slowly opened the box. It looked normal at first glance, probably because it had been in the fridge, but it was slightly discolored. Rosie, unable to smell it, said sadly, "If it had stayed like this, I might have eaten it. I can't taste anything anyway, and above all, it was something Sullivan brought for me. I wouldn't have doubted it." She looked at the pizza with sad eyes. I then said to Rosie, "Rosie, this may not be the right time to say this, but he is having an affair. He's not visiting you because he's caught up with his mistress." At my words, she looked up and exclaimed, "What? An affair? He must be joking. I hate men who cheat." I thought that also Rosie perhaps had some issues in the past. With that in mind, I decided to enlist her help. Sullivan must have been shocked. His mother, supposedly hospitalized, was standing next to his wife, both glaring at him furiously. "This is my house. What do you want in my home?" Rosie's voice echoed loudly. "Calm down, Mom. Please, lower your voice," Sullivan pleaded. Then, the couple with him, looking confused, turned to the real estate agent accompanying them. "What? Isn't this house for sale? We came here to preview it today. Can someone explain what's happening?" They glared at the real estate agent. That's because, Then, could you explain to us, Mariah?" I asked the agent. Sullivan and his friend Mariah couldn't find an excuse and looked down. "This foolish son seems to have concocted some scheme, but this is my house. I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave," Rosie said, and the couple, who had been considering buying the in-laws' house, left angrily, feeling their time had been wasted. "Let's go inside and discuss this in detail," Rosie said, still glaring at them. Actually, I had noticed their affair a little while ago. Embarrassingly, I had been making a big mistake all along. Sullivan's company is on my way home from work, and one day, as I was returning, my mobile phone rang. His message saying, "Stuck with overtime again because of the newbie's mistake," made me sigh deeply. By then, I was already suspecting his infidelity and thinking about how to gather evidence. Once, when I was near his company, I saw a group of 3 young women coming out. They looked like fresh recruits. Watching them, I smiled, reminiscing about my own early days. "Emily's the star among the newbies," one of them said. "It's been years since a newcomer's project got approved." I saw McGuire looking pretty jealous, another added. I froze. McGuire was my surname, and Sullivan's too. Was this Emily the one he was having an affair with? As they praised her, and she modestly replied, "Not at all." I was struck by her innocent appearance. Then I did something unexpected. "Excuse me, I overheard you. Are you from the sales department? I'm Mrs. McGuire." Before I was about to say so, they quickly started defending him, thinking I had heard them speaking ill of him. "Ah, are you McGuire's sister? We're always grateful for McGuire's help. You know, McGuire is amazing. I often see his wife picking him up at the entrance. They always leave holding hands." Their words confused me. "Eh? Oh, is that so? I heard he was Emily's mentor. He's not causing any trouble, is he? I decided to pretend to be his sister. Emily replied. Me? My mentor is someone else. McGuire isn't mentoring anyone. She seemed genuinely honest. He is a bit shy, so please keep our meeting a secret from my brother, I said before parting ways. What was he doing? Who was he cheating with? Unforgivable. Unable to investigate myself due to work, I hired a detective. When shown the photos of the other woman, I felt dizzy. It was Mariah, my friend, not some stranger. There were photos of her and Sullivan arm in arm entering a hotel, and others of them at what looked like Mariah's place. They were meeting almost daily. My love for Sullivan vanished. In Rosie's house, facing the two sullen figures, I said, "So, it's troublesome if Rosie gets discharged with the house viewing planned, huh? And to think you tried to feed her old pizza. Are you insane? You could have endangered her life." I ranted, and Mariah, crying, pleaded. "Don't blame him. It's my fault. I fell for him. He's not to blame." Sullivan gently comforted her. What am I even witnessing here? Yeah, Mariah. It's your fault. I heard about your bad reputation. You wouldn't have been interested if he wasn't my husband. Mariah, who had been crying, suddenly froze. What? What rumors? I told the flustered Mariah. About your multiple divorces and how they were all from stealing friends' husbands, and now you're working at that real estate company to pay off the alimony because your last husband found out about your cheating. I said it with disdain. I heard these stories from a college friend when I first suspected Mariah of being Sullivan's affair partner. In college, her nickname was Crusher. Known for snatching boyfriends but losing interest once she got them. A type of person I could never understand. Sullivan looked genuinely shocked upon hearing about Mariah's multiple divorces, but he said, "Even so, my feelings haven't changed. We truly love each other. I'm sorry for trying to sell the house secretly. It was her idea, to pay you alimony when we divorce." Was my husband always this foolish? His naivety gave me chills. He turned to Rosie. "Mom, let's sell the house. It's not a bad deal. I was going to convince you once we found a buyer. I thought you'd give it to me as a living inheritance. Please." Rosie, trembling with anger, yelled. "Like father, like son, both no goods. You saw how much I suffered when Dad cheated. How can you do something so terrible?" She hit him with her crutch, furious. I wanted to laugh at the sight but held back. Eventually, Sullivan and I divorced. I slammed him and Mariah with all the evidence and demanded compensation from both. Mariah's request to lower the amount because we were friends was laughable. Friendship discount on alimony? Are you stupid? Should I double it instead? I couldn't understand nor wanted to understand her twisted logic. Furthermore, I heard that Mariah got into legal trouble at her company for trying to sell properties illicitly and was sued. Burdened with debt and facing a difficult time, she was rumored to be in a bad state. Of course, she was fired from her company. Serves her right. And as expected, Sullivan was dumped the moment we divorced. He even came begging for reconciliation, waiting for me at my workplace. Before consulting the police, I went somewhere. "I'm sorry to intrude. I regret to inform you that I've divorced. I felt I owed you the news since you've been so supportive." I visited Sullivan's company to report the divorce to the executive vice president who had spoken at our wedding. Shockingly, Sullivan hadn't reported our divorce and was still wearing our wedding ring. Of course, mine was no longer on my finger. Sullivan stood there, mouth agape, unable to say a word. Emily and her friends realized. So, she wasn't his sister? Wow. McGuire is so toast. They laughed at the situation. A few months later, he relegated to a depopulated area. I hope he never returns. If he does show up again, I'll go straight to the police. I've been in occasional contact with Rosie since then. Thankfully, her sense of taste and smell fully recovered without any lingering effects. She was too scared to eat pizza for a while, but recently, I finally had pizza with my friends after a long time, she happily told me. As for me, I'm still dedicated to my work. Frankly, I've had enough of marriage for now, so I'm studying for qualifications to advance my career. My current goal is to eventually move back to my hometown and buy a spacious house to live with my parents.